watch, attend, and participate, as well as agendas, minutes, and recordings, can be found on Broomfield's website at broomfield.org/council meetings. The public may also participate in public comment either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last name, neighborhood, and the agenda item the caller would like to comment on. If you'd like to speak on more than one item on tonight's agenda, you'll need to press *3 each time to be placed back in the queue for comment. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 have 2 minutes. And if time remains, the next 26 plus participants have 1 minute to speak. For our hard of hearing residents present, we have wireless headsets available in the back of the council chambers through our AV team. The City Council regular meeting is called to order. Councilmember Leslie is excused. A quorum of the council is present. So will everyone please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. In an effort to keep order for tonight's meeting, I ask council members to limit their comments to 5 minutes. If council members are given an opportunity to speak for a second time on an item, they should limit their comments to 2 minutes. We'll plan on a 10-minute break at approximately 8 p.m. We'll begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Council may add or remove items from the consent agenda, or council may revise the order of business for the meeting. Does any member of the council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? Are there any objections to this agenda being approved? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Our first item under petitions and communications is an RTD update from Director Eric Davidson. He's also the chair of the Regional Transportation District Board of Directors. Mr. Davidson, would you please come to the podium and provide us an update?
Yes, hello. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. It's great to be here this evening with you all. My name is Eric Davidson. I am the chair of the RTD Board of Directors. I also represent this area, District I, which includes Longmont, Broomfield, Erie, Lafayette, part of Thornton, and I am a Broomfielder. So it's very great to be here tonight and meeting with all of you. This evening, I'm going to give a brief update on a couple of matters pertaining to RTD. If we go to the next slide, the few things I wanted to talk about tonight are Tabor and a forthcoming impact to the agency, some about RTD's financial outlook, which will contextualize Tabor, as well as briefly touch on some things RTD has been doing, why we would like to be able to continue our financial journey. And then I do want to talk about some of the transit legislation. It has been a very busy session, as I think you all are aware. So if we go to the next slide, which I think is a title slide, and we can go to the next one after that. This is really pretty simple. Just some history on RTD. So as many of you are probably familiar, there are really 2 parts of RTD's revenues. It's all in the form of sales and use tax. It's a 1% sales and use tax. The original portion, which we call the base system, is a 0.6% sales and use tax that was initially approved with the district by the voters. An additional 0.4% was added in 2004 for fast tracks. The 0.6% is largely our rubber tire fleet. It's largely bus. And the 0.4% is largely the rail system with the addition of the Flatiron Flyer. When we are talking about Tabor, what's happening right now is in 1999, the voters exempted RTD from the Tabor cap on the 0.6%, the base portion of our revenues, until we repay bonds associated with some of our initial rail construction, light rail construction, that is. So on the next slide, you'll see that what's happening is we're losing that exemption this year. We are repaying those bonds in November 2024. They will be complete. So roughly half of RTD's revenues, which is about $600 million, will be subject to the Tabor cap. We're not entirely sure yet what the order of magnitude is going to be on our risk exposure. It turns out to be a tricky calculation because we're collecting sales and use tax, but our Tabor calculation is based on property tax valuation. We have been in dialogue with Jefferson County and El Paso County and others who have faced Tabor and gone past their exemption. We are roughly looking at potentially a 7 to 11% risk exposure. That means that we could be risking $40 million to $70 million being above our Tabor cap per year, which would be a sizable impact to the agency. To convert that into what does that actually mean for us as a $1 billion agency, that would impact service levels on a roughly 2 to 4 year horizon, depending on low, medium, or high sensitivity. So we're doing some of that analysis right now. On the next slide, I believe I have a visual for the notorious ratchet down effect that I think that many of us are familiar with. That's really the known unknown that we're most concerned about. And you'll see that when I talk about RTD's broader finances. If we were, none of these are actual numbers, it's just sort of the hypothetical visualization here. If we were to hit a recession in the presence of our Tabor exemption, it would essentially reset that ceiling and that Tabor cap. What's really tricky is you'll see on a later slide I have with some actual numbers with RTD's future financial forecasts, it would exacerbate a problem that we have coming in the 2030s on some financial shortfalls. So really, while we are concerned about if we're not exempt from Tabor, refunding above that cap, probably the scariest thing for us is the ratchet down effect and the impact that it could have on out years. On the next slide, I'll touch on some of the things that we've been looking at internally. We have a task force inside the agency of staff members who are working with other government agencies to look at what our opportunities are to mitigate RTD's risk exposure from Tabor. One concept that came up was whether or not we could create an enterprise for our fares, which is a fee structure. Ultimately, this really didn't prove to be a fruitful exercise. It's, to forgive the expression and being loose with this, but it's sort of just the juice not being worth the squeeze. We would need to go through quite a bit of effort and actually open up some additional risk exposure and ultimately not really be preserving that much revenue. We provide a service to the public. So the concept of non-cash refunds has come up for other entities looking at sales and use tax. Again, refunding sales and use tax turns out to be somewhat of a murky territory in terms of how you do that. But by far and away, the best option, the cleanest option, excuse me, is looking at a voter approval, asking for a debrucing or the extension of our exemption. We are polling for that. We're working to understand what our opportunities are and reaching out to the community to understand what other stakeholders see us as being our best option. So I want to put this in the context of our broader financial outlook. So I'll go to the next section here and we can jump right to the next slide. There's sort of good news and bad news at RTD. The really good news is that we are exceptionally financially stable. The reason I say exceptionally, most U.S. transit agencies around the country coming out of COVID have significant financial shortfalls. RTD is very fortunate, Colorado is very fortunate to not be one of those agencies. We made some pretty dramatic leadership changes over the last couple of years, and we had an intense focus during COVID on how to really right the ship and right-size the agency for success. COVID was hard, but it was also a time of historically low interest rates. So we took advantage of that and did some really creative refinancing and a lot of work together on our financial team to get the agency into a stable footing. The result of that is our midterm horizon is very sound. We were actually projecting several years ago that the fast tracks portion of our budget was going to go into the red. That's no longer the case. That's now breaking even. The agency is stable. So that's the good news. The bad news, and in fact, I should note, S&P Global actually upgraded the Fast Tracks bonds to the highest possible rating at AAA, which also is exceptional in a time when our peer agencies are getting their bond ratings knocked down in their financial uncertainty. The bad news, the challenging news, is RTD is 75% dependent on a single source of revenue. This is a massive risk exposure given that it is sales and use tax. It's highly dependent on consumer spending. Multiple times in RTD's history, they have felt that shock and it immediately impacts the system. There's not a lot of slack in this system. And worse than that is that the projected growth for sales and use tax being our revenue stream does not grow as quickly as our costs and expenses do. So I'll touch on that a little bit in a slide where I think it's easiest to see that. And then, of course, we are going to be facing the Tabor exemption. So if we go to the next slide, I believe, oh, this just is a quick eye chart of our midterm financial plan. Really what you can see is, the green outline, or it appears teal here, shows that we're seeing net positive cash flows over the next couple of years. That's great. We like to see that. To the right, though, in these later years, you start to see some negative numbers. And it's the next slide that you'll really see an extensive forecasting effort that we did over the last couple of years that's quite troubling. We do forecast our costs and expenses will dramatically outgrow sales and use tax revenue growth. We might be wrong one direction or another. It's crystal ball time, but the extreme is really alarming here. And it's also not surprising. While we can be proud of the fact that in Colorado that we do have a financially stable agency, despite being lower funded on a per capita basis, some of it is also the fortune that we have a younger system. A lot of our peer agencies have older systems with high state of good repair costs that have really, in their cases, ballooned quite a bit. Our system's going to age. We built a very large system, particularly for an agency that's funded at $372 per capita. To put that in context, if you look at an urbanized area like Seattle, they're putting over $1,000 per capita into transit across multiple transit agencies. We have stretched this system quite thin. We send a lot of our revenue to a bank. We have cut that over the last couple of years with refinancing. But all that to say, this system is going to age and we'll need to take care of it. If we go to the next slide, this is an important point to just touch on how transit agencies are funded in the United States. So some agencies are funded by their state via a general fund or a transportation fund. Some are funded directly from taxes levied on the taxpayers directly. And some are funded by cities and counties, and then sort of any combination in between. RTD is solely from the taxpayer. We are directly levying a sales and use tax that goes to the taxpayer. There's not really anything coming in from the state. That's a little bit unique, again, for the size system that we are. And 70% of our 2024 revenue is sales and use tax. 75% of the midterm horizon is where we are from sales and use tax. A lot comes from the federal government, and then we have revenue coming in from fares. On the next slide, you'll see we're 44th in the nation for what we are funded by the state. We do think that that is the opportunity to partner with the state to identify, particularly as we look at aging infrastructure, which is not going to be a uniquely RTD problem. What do we need to partner on in order to raise the floor of our revenues? I want to just touch on a few more things and I'll open up for some questions. On the next couple slides, I'll kind of have some good news here, some recent agency success. The first slide, we'll talk about our new fare structure. It's probably one of the most popular things we've done recently. We leveraged our strong financial position that we've been able to create to actually lower fares and simplify them, doing away with the regional fares, which is huge for us up here for the first time in agency history. We've only ever been increasing. This board, this leadership said we've got a way too complex, way too expensive fare system. We slashed that way down, particularly on the discounted side of things, making transit a lot more accessible. The other thing we did on the next slide, you'll see we've started a zero fare for youth pilot program for a year, and we got a special exception, an exemption from the FTA allowing us to do this for a year. RTD is self-funding, offering free fares to everybody 19 and under. We're testing that. We're collecting data on that. We're very passionate about what this could represent, and we are currently lobbying the state in SB 32 to fund this on an ongoing basis to maintain this as a public service. And speaking of legislation, if we go to the next slide, and I think the slide after that, it is a very busy legislative session. I'll kind of just go through each of these and then open up for Q&A. SB 2432, it's a Senate bill that is methods to increase the use of transit. A lot that's in there is not necessarily RTD relevant. We did, however, bring in a support position. The most relevant portion to us is zero fare for better air, which we have run free fares in the summer months, and zero fare for youth, ongoing 19 and under free fare. This would fund it on an ongoing basis. it's not a huge amount of money, but it's meaningful in that it's a step in the direction of the state saying, hey, I'll backstop those revenues. We can offer this as a public service. So we are in a support. I see that there is a typo on here with the support surface transportation. I'm sorry, that is supposed to be 182 or 184, SB 24 184, which is the bill dealing with Front Range Passenger Rail and a possible JPA. So my apologies for the typo there. We did take an amend position initially as presented. The bill, when it was first introduced, called for RTD to conduct a study and potentially even be an operator running from Denver Union Station to Fort Collins. We have collected tax money for fast tracks projects. That means that we need to spend those taxpayer dollars on RTD district projects that have the stops and have everything that aligns with what our taxpayers voted on. So we ultimately said it would make more sense for the Front Range Passenger Rail District, who's running intercity passenger rail studies, to conduct the study running to Fort Collins. RTD would like to be a partner if possible along that alignment. There's a lot of moving parts there. Happy to answer any questions here or offline on that, but we did take an amend position. We have gotten in large part the amendments that we were seeking, and now we're following along. 1313, of course, that's probably something that's influencing you all a lot more. That is land use. We have not adopted a position this late in the session. We're unlikely to do so. RTD staff was consulted. We have a nationally recognized transit-oriented development manager who's exceptional. She was consulted on what are the types of things that actually help promote transit. But the board doesn't have an adopted position. And on 1447, that's perhaps the most famous or infamous, depending on your viewpoint, bill of them all right now, which is RTD transit reform. We did take an opposed position. We took that position before the governance provisions were pulled. We did testify at the hearing. Representative Lindstedt and Representative Froelich and Senator Winter did pull the governance provisions. For those not familiar, this was looking to restructure the board. We ultimately felt this is happening very quickly. It was done in a way that wasn't widely stakeholdered. We had a lot of concerns around that. We heard a lot from rider advocacy groups that were expressing tremendous concerns around equitable representation. And then there were a number of things in the bill that were duplicative with ongoing efforts or potentially administratively burdensome that we were seeking some additional alignment on. We understand some more amendments are coming to this. There was quite a bit of testimony in opposition last Wednesday, I believe. I'm losing track of time here when this was heard. So now we're following along with what the amendments may be, but we are in an opposed position. So with that, Mayor, I thank you for inviting me here and for allowing me to speak on this. I know that was a lot very quickly, and if there's any time, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much for that wonderful, concise update, Director Davidson. We do allow public comments, so if anyone from the public would like to speak on this matter, please come up to the podium. Not seeing any takers, then we'll go to council member questions or comments. Does any member of council have any questions or comments for Director Davidson? Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Director Eric Davidson, for coming tonight. And thank you for making the rounds with Dr. Cog and our Metro Area County Commissioners. One of the things on that last slide that was noted was that there was just a lack of stakeholdering. It seems in a lot, and we've seen this throughout a lot of different bills. It isn't just transportation. So just so you know, the Metro Area County Commissioners is sort of reassessing our role and how we engage with this legislature. And we do have staff with Dr. Cog, and we're looking at ways to sort of connect with them in the off season before they head into that legislative session. And sort of create a space for our Metro Area County Commissioners to really give that stakeholdering, what worked, what didn't work in the legislative session, and what we would like to see. So we would love to, sort of partner with you all because we know that that's a big part of that discussion. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, council member. I would love the opportunity to partner on that. There are so many things that are challenging in transit right now, from what our workforce is facing and the challenges they face out there, from funding levels and so forth, that I would love to have lengthy processes to engage and roll up our sleeves and talk about what we're going to do to address these. So thank you for the invitation, and I will always make myself available for those kinds of discussions.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director Davidson, for being here, providing an update. I ride RTD often, and I will say that it continues to be a great experience. So thank you for your continued work. Some of these points that you pointed out are staggering, right? So 70% of the sales, 70% of the system funding is coming from that sales and use tax, which is pretty staggering. And the idea that we're 44th in the country for transit agencies in terms of state funding. So I'm curious, this current session, the legislature and maybe the governor's office has expressed quite a desire to overhaul RTD, or at least kind of get into the governance of RTD and maybe some other pieces of RTD. Were there conversations about state funding to go along with these conversations and this desire to fix RTD?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I appreciate the question a great deal because I think whether we like it or not, we're going to have that conversation at some point. So there has been an appetite. We've heard from legislators, we've heard from the administration that they do want to talk about funding. There's even been some concepts that have been floated for how to fund transit, which fortunately is something we can look to other states, what they've created in terms of transportation funds. Nothing came forward during the session, at least not at this point. I think there's an appetite. I think there's a discussion. I think it's going to require a lot of stakeholdering, but unfortunately, nothing this session. I do think that the funding discussion is the right time to be talking about the whole system design and where we want this to go and what we want this to be. So I think engaging together on what is our vision for transit, how does that impact the boardroom, how does that impact the way we plan service, doing that with funding to me makes a lot of sense. I think in some ways we're a little bit out of order. That's my opinion, not the full official board position. But to answer your question simply, there's an appetite, but nothing that's been put forward as a proposal at this point.
Okay, and to stick with the kind of revenue and the funds, the expenses, as you showed, are outpacing the revenue and the forecast. Some people in our community and maybe in the rest of the district would say, "Holy moly, RTD is going to spend more money than they're going to bring in. How are they going to do this?" And so, could you just clarify that? What that chart is showing in terms of you aren't going to spend more than you bring in, and what does that look like?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, obviously we won't be able to do that if those days come. So there are things we're doing right now. It's very important to take care of this infrastructure. And since we are stable, compounding interest is on our side right now. So, we're actually taking on some of these deferred maintenance projects. A big one that I think is going to probably raise some frustration, it's just sort of hard to get around. We're going to reconstruct the downtown light rail loop. That was constructed 30 years ago. We're fully reconstructing it. It needs to last another 30. I think a bad habit that America's gotten in, and certainly transit agencies have been a part of this, is just kicking it down the road. While we are in a stable position right now, we're taking that on. We want to make sure the system stays safe and we safeguard the investments. That's one strategy to make sure those costs don't balloon. The other thing is we can start talking about, in the presence of Tabor or not in the presence of Tabor, what adjustments we would make to our fiscal policies. We put money into reserves. We're somewhat conservative with our reserves, which is why our bond ratings are strong. We may need to adjust our fiscal policies and revisit those. And then other agencies that have been facing these shortfalls, they're seeking these big bailouts. I hesitate to call it a bailout, but San Francisco is looking for $1 billion for BART. SEPTA in Philadelphia, who's funded at a similar per capita as we are, Pennsylvania legislature is looking at $300 million a year. Rather than get all the way to that point, and if they don't get that money, they're going to dramatically cut service and dramatically increase fares. That could be RTD in those days. So to your point, we don't spend more than we take in. I think we'll have those conversations sooner. So if we're not making progress on sustainable long-term funding changes, I think in the late 2020s, the board, it's going to be incumbent on the board to have discussions about where do we cut back? How do we reduce? How do we right size? And what we can do in the current board members from our seat is say, well, compounding interest on our side. So let's talk about it, raise the flag, get everyone finding a solution, and let's address the maintenance projects that will only get more expensive later now.
Awesome. Well, it takes great discipline to take care of the already existing infrastructure instead of always chasing those shiny and new, programmatic or capital expenses projects. So thank you for helping to lead RTD and your service to Broomfield and the district.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. Again, thank you for the great report. I would note that Colorado typically is 44th to 50th in state rankings for funding because of Tabor, including education, which I think is like 49th. So unfortunately, that's our circumstances. But one thing I was interested in your presentation is passenger traffic projections. I know COVID took a hit, but with those numbers, what are your projections on traffic
If our ridership numbers.
ridership?
Yeah, thank you, council members. Great question. So, ridership was significantly hit by COVID and, we're still, if we look at pre-COVID numbers, which in some ways we're in this phase of trying to move on and model what the new patterns are, we're in the high 60% in terms of what has returned. Other agencies, to put that in context, are in the 70s, some are in the 50s. We have a very high work from home state. And in fact, I believe we have the city with the highest work from home. And so we've hit a real impact. We've seen a real impact on some of those commuter routes. Interestingly, we've seen an uptick on some special events and weekend service, which our service planners are adapting to. Some routes in Denver are even beyond their pre-COVID numbers, and they're just as productive as they've ever been, if not more. Our forecasts don't have us returning to pre-COVID, and that's just something we're all sharing across the transit agency right now. We're fortunate not to be overly dependent on the fares in this case, so we can, be somewhat agile in that environment. But it's tricky, and we are seeing recovery in some areas, but we expect a pretty permanent change on some of those commuter routes that we're heavily dependent on commute. Again, I think there's an opportunity in there. We've seen the N Line, for example, at Eastlake do pretty well at events on weekends and sporting events and so forth. So we're following that. We're monitoring that. It's a little hard for us to project where we're going to end up. S&P did a great report, I think about a year and a half ago, trying to tackle this problem for agencies. And it's already wrong, but it's sort of projecting everyone ends up in somewhere the 70 to 80% mark. It's just still crystal ball territory, unfortunately.
But we don't project an increase necessarily. We're just going to be at where we're at now.
I think there will be an increase. I think it's going to continue at an increase. I don't think we're going to see, aggressive movements in one direction or another. I think we'll see a steady increase, which we're seeing now. And certainly as growth continues, we'll stay at the rate of local growth.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lim.
Yes, it would be typical of the legislation that is not already designated with funding in the budget for bills to kind of have to scale down their budgetary demands. So did the board take a position on SB 2432 if only one of those programs could be funded, which they would prefer, and why?
We didn't really have a formal position on it. It's a great question of, what would we choose? I think I'll speak as just one individual director and on my opinion, not official board position. Zero fare for youth, I think, is really important. It's an ongoing basis. We heard powerful testimony at SB 32 at the first hearing from not only Denver Public Schools, who reported an impact on truancy rates, a positive impact, but also students who came to testify. I think it's a powerful public service. It also has an impact for Colorado families in cutting the costs that they're spending. It gives access to youth to opportunities, and they're the future riders. It's the habits and behaviors are formed early. I think Zero Fare for Better Air has been a great program, but I remain bullish that the way we funded it so far, we've been able to find these opportunities in partnership with the state and looking at energy opportunities. And that may be something we continue to see grants and opportunities to partner as we look at what to do about those high ozone months. So, just my humble opinion, not official board position. I really hope we see Zero Fare for Youth continue in perpetuity. But no, the board didn't really contemplate a, specific position on that.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. It's great to see you again within 7 days.
Yeah.
And Director Davidson. So I won't repeat the questions that I asked at the DRCOG meeting, but I did come up with another question. I know you mentioned the Fast Tracks bond and its ability to essentially break even has occurred. My question is that based on current expenditures that we have, or is that based on full build out of the Fast Tracks plan, knowing that the B line still has to be completed in its entirety, the N line still has to be completed in its entirety, the L line, the Southwest extension, and bringing back full FF service.
An enhanced bus feeder service. Yeah, thank you, Council.
I was going to ignore that one. but Yes.
Thank you for the question. I love the question. It's a great question. That is based on current service levels. There are a couple of challenges with fast tracks, as we all know. I mean, as I said a testimony recently, RTD is sort of the expert of what happens when things get overpromised, overmodeled, and underdelivered. And one of the big challenges from a finance perspective with the way Fast Tracks was built out is taking on any additional O&M does start to dramatically impact that long-term plan, which is one of the reasons we need to look at how to bolster that and how to model that. That when I say that Fast Tracks, the portion of the budget is now at this point where it roughly will break even, that's looking at the midterm financial horizon, and it's looking at the service that we're operating today. I'd say the service we plan to operate by 2027, what's in the plan. So actually a higher service level than we have now, but not with additional capital expenditures.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure that my thinking was correct. So thank you.
Great question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Thank you, Director Davidson, for coming to speak to this and give us this great presentation. Just one question on the, kind of going off the other questions on the fast tracks and the ridership levels. With the change in commuting and, work from home, what are we seeing as far as potential numbers for the completion of the line to Longmont, as far as rail? I mean, because I know the peak study was talking about 3 downtown in the morning, 3 up. Will that still hold for the current ridership models that we have? Are people still going to be commuting that direction?
Yeah, thank you, Council Member. It's an interesting question as we consider those travel patterns I mentioned. Our data had suggested there's still quite a bit of commute that is happening, into Denver along the roadways. On the peak service study, my apologies that we don't have the data ready for this. This has been the thing we've been really wanting done here. As just a kind of quick refresh of where we are, several years ago, the RTD board, I think this is 2021, I believe, we moved forward with a plan to study the peak service feasibility. And part of that was getting the ridership numbers and working with DRCOG, working with all of the communities, which, for example, Ms. Grant from here in Broomfield has been tremendous in that, and working together to model this out. We're nearing the completion of that study, which will give us updated costs and updated ridership numbers. And some of that has been contemplated, although we do lean heavily on the DRCOG models, which I think everybody's sort of struggling with. What is this new world that we live in, commute patterns? The data from traffic certainly, support the idea that many people are still commuting, particularly long distances. To what extent, that's something we'll get a chance to take a look at, hopefully in the next couple of months here. We're waiting on one key piece before we can round out that peak service feasibility study.
When do you anticipate that to come out?
It was supposed to be done, and really what we're waiting on here, there's a heavy dependence on BNSF since they own the right-of-way, and there are some final numbers coming from them. I'm hesitant to state a date because I've been given a couple of dates. RTD technical staff is essentially done. They're just gonna have to rework a few things once we get that final data. So I think it's imminent. It kind of needs to be imminent because we're anxious to communicate that out to the Front Range Passenger Rail District as they continue their service development plan. So apologies for being vague on that. I'm just learning my lesson on, being told it keeps moving out.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? All right, well, thank you so much, Director Davidson. We appreciate you giving us the update and for your advocacy for our area and Broomfield.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all you do as a Broomfielder. I mean, I've said it to many of you, this is an awesome place to live. So it's not easy work what you all do, and thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a proclamation declaring May 2024 as Military Appreciation Month. Will Mr. Dewhurst and any other representatives here to accept the proclamation please come and meet Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf at the podium. First, I'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening. I'll summarize the proclamation and then I'll turn it over to the representatives for comments. This proclamation recognizes that in 1999, the United States Congress passed a resolution proclaiming May as National Military Appreciation Month, calling for all Americans to remember those who gave their lives in the defense of freedom and to honor the men and women of all of our armed services who have served and are now serving our country together with their families. The city and county of Broomfield is home to many veterans and military families and is honored to serve those who currently serve and have served our nation. The Broomfield Workforce Center provides ongoing free assistance for veterans and their families in filing for any veterans benefits and values its partnership with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment for the Regional Veteran Employer Representatives and Disabled Veteran Outreach Specialist. Several city and county of Broomfield departments provide services and events for veterans and military families, including the Memorial Day celebration picnic, honoring our veterans luncheon. Therefore, as mayor, I hereby declare and proclaim May 2024 as Military Appreciation Month and dedicate this commemoration month as a symbol of unity to recognize, honor, and support the commitment and sacrifice of current, former, and fallen members of all branches of the United States Armed Forces and their families. Mr. Davis?
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, residents of Broomfield. It's a pleasure to be here before you as a retired Marine veteran and one of your deputy city county managers. We have an esteemed team behind me here that has put together an amazing array of events for the month of May to support veterans and their families. I'm sure a couple of them will come up and share some of that, but special thanks to Sue Spriggs, who has organized us. Round of applause, really. Sue is such a sweetheart, and she brings passion to work every day, and her appreciation for veterans in particular is really heartfelt and appreciated. It's both an honor and a privilege to stand here before you this evening as we proclaim May 2024 as Military Appreciation Month in Broomfield. This month is dedicated to acknowledging and celebrating the unwavering commitment and sacrifices made by our service members, veterans, and their families. For Military Appreciation Month, the Broomfield Workforce Center, Veterans Museum of Broomfield, the Broomfield Library, Broomfield Senior Services, and the Broomfield Development, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office are working together to plan a month full of veteran-focused events, including a career and resource fair specific to veterans, workshops to both veterans and employers, and an appreciation luncheon at the Senior Center. The month will close with the capstone event, the Memorial Day Picnic and celebration hosted by the Broomfield Library and the Broomfield Veterans Museum. These efforts not only assist our veterans in transitioning back to civilian life, but also enhance our community's understanding and appreciation of the skills and values our veterans bring with them. Broomfield is home to many who have worn our country's uniform. They are our neighbors, friends, and family members who have stood vigilant in the defense of our freedoms. It is said that men and women sleep peacefully in their beds at night because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalf. Tonight, we reflect on why men and women, fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, friends and family are prepared to face such perils. We remember the immense sacrifices made, sacrifices that often go beyond the battlefield and reach into the very fabric of daily life. Nearly 23 years ago, our way of life was challenged by the attacks on September 11, 2001. In the aftermath, we transitioned from a nation of peace to one marked by heightened security and vigilance. Many of our service members, having joined in the wake of these events, knew all well the personal costs of their commitment. Their sacrifices are not only in the form of time away from loved ones, but often involve significant personal hardship. They endure these trials so that we may live our lives in peace. Tonight, as we introduce this important proclamation, let us also extend our recognition beyond ceremonies and speeches. We challenge everyone listening today to take a moment to reflect on the freedoms and securities we enjoy. made possible by those who have served and continue to serve our nation. We also encourage all residents to proudly display the flag of the United States at their homes and businesses throughout May as a gesture of solidarity and appreciation. Let's put our gratitude into action. We encourage everyone to demonstrate their appreciation by being good neighbors and active community members. Whether it's helping a veteran with a home project, volunteering at veteran-related events, or simply taking time to learn more about the military experiences of our friends and family, these acts of kindness and acknowledgement are powerful. They reflect our community's spirit and commitment to those who have given so much. Let us all commit to doing good works and fostering a community that honors and supports our military members, not just this month, but throughout the year. God bless our military personnel, past and present, our Broomfield community, the state of Colorado, and the United States of America. At this time, I'd like to now introduce Gary Francis, who graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1968 and served for more than 21 years as a naval officer, including command of the USS Baton Rouge, a nuclear attack submarine. Gary is also president of our very own Broomfield Veterans Museum. Gary?
That was beautiful, Don.
you.
Thank you. That was, wow.
Thank you. Thank you, Don. I had the pleasure of attending this ceremony last year, the military appreciation, and Don gave a really inspirational speech, and I invited him to come and talk at the Veterans Museum at our Memorial Day, or at our Veterans Day service, because it was so powerful, and I figured a Marine's a Marine's a Marine. He's going to give a great talk, and I really appreciate that. Well, I've got two purposes here today. One is to invite the mayor to participate in our Memorial Day, as we always do. That's pretty well set up now. We've got our speaker finally sorted out, and I think we're going to have a really great program, including a flyover if the weather cooperates. And additionally, the Veterans Museum has some really important activities going on this month, in the month of May. Right now, we have the 10th Mountain Division display up, and it's gotten a lot of publicity, and we've had a lot of people come by and take a look at it. But that is going to go down on May 14th. And then we're going to be installing a display of the 80th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. And on May 25th, 2 days before Memorial Day, we're going to have a talk on that D-Day invasion by Flint Whitlock and Don Seigan, two history buffs and authors. It should be a spectacular talk. That'll be at 10 o'clock on Saturday, the 25th. And we have two other sessions during the month on Saturday. So the second Saturday, we have Colleen Sawyer, who's going to talk about Eleanor Roosevelt and her role as the first U.S. ambassador to the UN. And on the third Saturday, we're going to have, I better make sure I get his name right, otherwise I'll mess that up. But we have basically an Army veteran who was also an author or an artist, Noah Webb. And so he's got several, I think a dozen paintings that he's done of his experience in Vietnam. And the Vietnam conflict, and that's going to be on display after his talk. So he'll talk about the pictures, and then we'll put them up on the walls in the museum. So please plan on coming out to the museum during May. We're open Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 till 2, and Saturday from 9 till 3. So Saturday the talks are always at 10 o'clock. And they go as long as the speaker wants to, or we usually have tons of questions to get them to expand on what they're talking about. But I've been a resident here for 34 years, and I've been involved with the museum for about 20 of those. So it's a great opportunity for me to come and thank you for this proclamation and for the support that the city gives us in the museum. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Francis. Before you go, That was such a wonderful plug for our amazing hidden gem, our Broomfield Veterans Museum. Is there a website where folks can go find out where this information is?
Absolutely. Yes, it's broomfieldveterans.org. And you can
Perfect.
see, and you'll see all of the upcoming speakers that we have set up. And you can become a member of the Veterans Museum for $25.
Excellent. Y'all got that. Thank you very much, Mr. Francis, for your service and for your continued service with our museum. Would anyone else like to provide remarks? Got this amazing crew. No pressure, but yes, the founder of our event. Hello.
Just quickly, I'm
This
gonna
is
leave,
Susan Spriggs, y'all.
our calendar of events at the back of the room. We would love to have any and all of you attend these events. And we're very excited to have our third year of Military Appreciation Month. So thank you very much. Thank you, council, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Spriggs. So we do have public comments. If anyone would like to comment on this item, now would be the time. Anyone else in the group? Any questions or comments from council? Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. Every year I like to speak to this issue. Of course, my husband served in Afghanistan. His father served in Vietnam, and his brother served in Iraq just a year before Scott did. So both of his parents had one kid in Iraq for a year and then had about a 10-day break, and then the other child went to Afghanistan. I would like to just thank you so much, Ms. Spriggs, for bringing all of these events forward. I know you put your heart and soul into this. And I still get teary about things. It's either housing or veterans. And I really feel like a strong sense that this really builds our community, knowing what it's like to be a part of peace in a time when we have a really war-torn world right now. And I'm not sure it's going to slow down. But these community events really bring peace, and it's bringing people across, different areas of life that maybe have not experienced wartime. And we always tell our son he wanted to join the military, and we said, your dad and your uncle and your grandpa punched that ticket. Let's hold off on that, but we can serve in other ways. And so I think this is a way that our youth, kind of like my son Connor, he really has this huge desire to attend events like this because he really feels pulled for this patriotism. And I also wanted to add too, we've had a lot of our Afghan allies resettle in Broomfield. They've gone through the War Museum. And so we have Afghan interpreters that are willing to speak. So if you ever want a speaker from Afghanistan who served as an interpreter, they've now kind of resettled a little bit, and they're, in a different mode rather than just survival and trying to find jobs. And so they're really feeling like Broomfield is their home, and they felt welcomed here. And so thank you.
I'd like to address that. We're always interested in trying to get some of the younger veterans involved. Obviously, they have families and other activities that take them away, but we try to offer a welcoming place for them to come and share their stories. So we're always looking for younger speakers. We have a lot of old guys like me coming in. We can talk all day, but we need some of the younger ones, the younger folks to come and talk.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
have a lot of young interpreters that served our armed forces for likely about 10 years, just straight. And one of the things that people forget too is that these interpreters, they don't have a US to go home to after a year. They have to go right to their home that's also in Afghanistan. So their families are not protected from the Taliban. And we've seen that in other countries as well. And so I just want to address that they have also served alongside our armed forces, and that these families actually have been in a lot more danger than even my own husband and so on. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Any other council member comments? Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say thank you so much for this presentation, and thank you for your service, those who've served. Again, my background is that I am the son of Vietnamese refugees, and my grandfather fought for the Republic of Vietnam. So, it was through American soldiers American churches who sponsored and brought my family here, and we're able to really enjoy our democracy because of those who are committed to the military and to obviously protecting our country and our democracy. Recently, my other hat with the state job, Sue knows about this, we do a lot of stuff with aerospace in the military. And last week we attended an event where we recognized the families of children who have parents who are serving as well. And obviously this is, this month is both for the military appreciation for those who served and the families who, have to make their own sacrifices for those who serve our nation. So again, I thank you so much for being here and I appreciate your words and thank you so much again.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here tonight and accepting this important proclamation. I'll definitely be at the Memorial Day event and I'll try to catch some of the other ones that are coming up this May. So thank you all again so much. Next, we have a proclamation declaring May 2024 as Mental Health Awareness Month. Will Director Valling and any other representatives here to accept the proclamation, please come meet Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf at the podium. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'll summarize the proclamation and I'll turn it over to you guys for comments. I'll give them a second to exit. All right. This proclamation stresses that access to behavioral health care remains a top priority across the state and locally. Over 1.7 million is dedicated to behavioral health in Broomfield, including opioid resettlement funds, state grants, retail marijuana funds, city funds, and nonprofit grant funds. The Behavioral Health Improvement Plan aims to reduce stigma, increase access to services, and improve community connectedness through a comprehensive and population-based approach. A multi-sector partnership has come together to implement the plan, which includes CCOB departments, Community Reach Center, and mental health partners, local nonprofit organizations, hospitals, local school districts, the Colorado Community Health Alliance, the Metro Area Public Health and Human Services agencies, and our state partners. Subject matter experts have been convening the Broomfield Behavioral Health Coalition in order to collaboratively address behavioral health needs and the opioid crisis in Broomfield, with efforts including building resilience and a sense of belonging, among other strategies. Therefore, as mayor, I hereby declare and proclaim the month of May 2024 as Mental Health Awareness Month in Broomfield. Would the representatives like to make any comments?
Yes. Hi, my name is Kelsey Warren. I work with our Public Health and Environment Department. I'm the Community Health Coordinator. And of course, we want to thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and the City Council for recognizing May as Mental Health Awareness Month, in addition to military as May Awareness Month as well, too. This is such an important month for, I'm sure many of us can relate to, our community members, even for a lot of us on individual levels, that we need to recognize and uplift mental health through these awareness efforts. And this is the 5th year that we have declared May as Mental Health Awareness Month in the city and county of Broomfield. So thank you for bringing the awareness to the City Council, but also to your communities and to people in your families as well, too. We did see a decrease in residents reporting poor mental health in 2023 compared to a few years earlier in 2021. While this is a big accomplishment in due part to all of the efforts to improve mental health, we also know that a barrier to improving our community's mental health has gotten worse, which is being able to receive care when someone needed it, but was not able to get an appointment. That's something that we've seen become more challenging with mental health care. Our Public Health and Environment Department is here today with 2 of our community-based mental health centers who we work collaboratively with in many different aspects, Community Reach Center and Mental Health Partners, who serve our Broomfield community residents. These 2 organizations provide a variety of mental health services at low or no cost to our community members, and they've served many of them in order to meet the demand for mental health care that we're seeing. And they're continuing to work on strategies to make mental health care more accessible, very tirelessly, and with lots of bills this legislative session too, as I might add. So I'm not going to speak any further, but I would like them to share their perspectives and why this month is so important to rise up. So I'm going to bring up first our representative, Amanda Jones, who's the COO from Community Reach Center, to just give some talking points on Mental Health Awareness Month.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this proclamation. Again, Community Reach Center is very honored to help support behavioral health needs for the city and County of Broomfield residents. Although we have seen some changes to the need for behavioral health, we also have ongoing statistics that tell us that the needs are out there. Many times, mental health symptoms result in feeling sadness, depression, loneliness, anxiety. I think many of us can even ourselves connect to those different feelings. And so we recognize we have family, we have friends, we have loved ones that are around us. And we want to make sure that mental health is a part of well-being and a part of health. Some of the different efforts that we are helping to support, not only around trying to provide ongoing education for how to access mental health and substance abuse, but is by doing ongoing education. Some of the things that both Community Reach Center, certainly No Mental Health Partners supports, is training and education through mental health first aid classes and being able to educate the general public around, again, let's normalize mental health and access to those services. And we do that by offering free educational trainings to the community and to the public. Again, Community Reach Center is honored to be able to support care within our community. We also welcome you to visit our website or to provide resources to any loved ones or friends that you know as well. Thank you for this proclamation.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. And I just want to invite our other community-based mental health center up to share about what they're doing for Mental Health Awareness Month. This is Jen Leos, who's the co-CEO of Mental Health Partners.
Thank you all for this proclamation. Just want to point out that just how important our partnership is for MHP with the City and County of Broomfield and with local community mental health centers. It really is amazing, and just want to highlight the need and just what we create as a safety net for our community members. And as Amanda spoke about, there's a lot of awareness that has been found, lots of destigmatization of mental health over the past few years. And there's a lot of work left to be done. And I think that's a lot of what we hope is that we continue to see people seeing mental health is healthcare. It really is whole person care, population health care. And so I think, as Amanda spoke to, there's a lot that we're trying to do at Mental Health Partners around just access, affordability, trying to break down barriers around language, just what we can do to best serve our community. And again, some of the trainings that we offer, we have a community health worker program where we have liaisons that are out within the Broomfield community, partnering with many of the organizations within Broomfield to really get individuals connected with services, not just Mental Health Partners, right? Like, where can we get folks connected? And a lot of that is, as Amanda spoke to too, is just awareness. Where can we get resources? What are the needs? How can we get people connected? And that's such important work, I think, that we all do and are so thankful for our partnerships that we have with the City and County of Broomfield. One theme for us at Mental Health Partners of Mental Health Awareness Month is keep going. And healing and wellness can be a long-term journey for many people. And so we encourage people to focus on their mental health and recovery one day at a time. Likewise, Mental Health Partners will continue to keep serving the Broomfield community just as we have for the past 60+ years. So appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jen. And just to close, we have some action items this month that we are doing with public health. And most of that is we're partnering with these two community-based mental health centers, and we're doing some social media promotion around different events going on. We do have some public free community trainings around mental health that are coming up that anybody in Broomfield is able to take. Introduction to mental health and wellness, for example, our question, persuade, refer, suicide prevention training. So we have some options for you to plug into. And the way that you can find those is going to broomfield.org/public health and navigate with that mental health resources button. And you can find those trainings. And you can also find our mental health resources webpage, which has a curated list of mental health resources in and around Broomfield that you can access for yourself, your family, and your friends. So thank you for allowing us to declare this May as Mental Health Awareness Month.
Thank you very much for that information too, and for all of you for being here. Would anyone else like to speak? Anyone else want to make any remarks? Okay, well then we're going to go to public comment. If anyone would like to be heard on this item. Oh, this is on public comment, yeah. It's hard enough. So, public comment on this item, not seeing any council comments on this item? All right, well, thank you all so much, and thank you for all your advocacy in the community. All right, so now we'll go to council member reports. We'll start with, who wants to go first? Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So, fellow council colleagues, bear with me. For one of my reports tonight, it's a little bit lengthy, but this last week I sent you all an email regarding the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council. They have prepared a questionnaire to shape the agenda for the upcoming meetings in May and in June. The appointed members to the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council are encouraged to collaborate in filling out the questionnaire with their fellow elected leaders and staff. I've already filled it out initially, and staff has reviewed it and provided any required technical details. Earlier today was our deadline to submit that, and I thank Councilmember Lim for your points that you had provided. The questionnaire is intended to accomplish three main goals: gather information from the various directors on how their respective jurisdiction, organizational values, the council's role in various functions and environmental concerns, build the facilitator's understanding of each jurisdiction, organization's vision for the council's future, and provide an opportunity for directors to engage their communities, staff, and fellow local officials to ensure the directors are reflecting the perspective of their jurisdiction, organization, however they see fit. So the questionnaire highlights various things. We rated various current purposes for the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council, expressing concern about various environmental issues associated with Rocky Flats, and then an opinion and potential decision about the various options for the future of the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council. So those various options are really continue with the council's current mission, organization, and function. B, reimagine the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council's purpose and organizational structure. And then C, disband the council and allow local municipalities to individually interact with the DOE, EPA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, land legacy management, and resident and stakeholders. At the end of going through all of that, the determination was that Broomfield supports the council pursuing option C and disband the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council. However, in order to do this, there needs to be the necessary staff to close out the organization. With the dissolution of the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council, there might be future funding from the DOE that could be available for grant programs for local jurisdictions with activities associated with Rocky Flats, like public engagement, information distribution, or community projects. And lastly, there might need to be congressional action for the official dissolution of the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council, so there should be conversations initiated with Colorado's congressional delegation. In the end, the existence of the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council has no bearing on the existence of the former Rocky Flats site and the activities performed there, as well as the contamination left behind. The issues of nuclear war, contamination of the Rocky Flats site, and construction of the facilities and recreation activities on the refuge will continue and be contentious issues and will require communication between jurisdictions and with stakeholders. The Department of Energy and the federal administration has a duty to ensure the constant monitoring and publicizing of the testing data in a publicly accessible and accountable way. The local jurisdictions also need to continue to have communication channels available to converse between the DOE and other federal agencies with regard to the Rocky Flats site. So on later this week, we'll be submitting this completed questionnaire to the facilitators for that May meeting, and we will continue these conversations as a larger Rocky Flats Stewardship Council. But wanted to thank council in providing comments, and again, thank you to Councilmember Lim. So that's one of the issues, and then the other issue is the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Community Noise Roundtable. We voted to withdraw that and encourage the termination of the IGA. We did not send that in quickly enough, so I get to go back for one more meeting. So we will have another meeting, which I will chair on May 2nd. This is going to be at 4 o'clock. Normally we hold these at 6 o'clock. However, the airport directors open forum is going to occur that night at 6 o'clock or at 5 o'clock. And so they wanted to make sure that the public as well as the community noise roundtable had an option to go there. So we are going to have our meeting at 4 o'clock. We will kind of help transition the organization during that hour, but we will find out more on May 2nd. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Marshallson.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Wynn and I held a Ward 1 community town hall last Thursday. We had a pretty good turnout. About 15 residents came and were very well engaged. We held it in the Greenway Park Clubhouse. So as you can imagine, the number one point of conversation was the town square because it's right across the street. So that was a robust conversation about that, and I urged all of them to. We urged all of them to tune in tonight because I knew we were getting an update this evening. We also had a conversation regarding the timeline for Universal Hauler. We also talked about some road maintenance issues that some of them had brought forward. So it was a good conversation, and we look forward to having another one in sometime next quarter, probably. So
Wonderful.
thank you.
Thank you both. Councilmember Whitten.
Thank you, Mayor. My only report is that we, one of my other dual roles is working with Lieutenant Governor's office. We hosted the Broomfield Teen Council yesterday, actually, at the state capitol as they were touring the capitol, meeting with Representative Lindstick and, of course, the Lieutenant Governor. And I had the privilege to also speak on behalf of my role as council, and just want to highlight that the youth in Broomfield are very active and involved, and that they had a lot of questions about how to get involved in local politics and more and beyond just high school as well. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to have 2 points here. I did also provide feedback for in the Rocky Mountains Stewardship Council. Serving on that board, it's very difficult to digest all the information all at once, but also it was a very good chance for to have more eyes on or more public eyes on the matter with the Jefferson Parkway, possibly, us, disbanding from them. There's less communication about Rocky Flats. So my only concern was just to make sure and just reassure that our residents are going to have constant eyes on this as well. This doesn't mean I don't feel that the work done on that site is going to be ignored, but just the communication will just look different. And I look forward to working regionally in that regard. We did have a Metro Area County Commissioner meeting last Friday, and we are pleased to support HB 24-1322, directing the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing to conduct a feasibility study and pursue an 1115 waiver from Medicaid to fund housing and housing-related supports. Over a dozen states have pursued these efforts and are seeing positive impacts. When it comes to health outcomes, we know that housing is one of those things that you need in order to have better health outcomes. And so that's the part of being creative with a Medicaid waiver, and we'll be sending that letter soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
Yes, I just wanted to call to residents' attention if anyone's interested in the possibility of solar on their home. There is a solar launch event tomorrow in Broomfield Community Center from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. It's a partnership between the City and County of Broomfield Sustainability Department and Sun, a solar provider. and nonprofit, and they are giving out, providing free information for anyone who may be interested in pursuing solar. I also attended the United Power Annual Meeting and 85th anniversary recently. Part of our GHG goals certainly depend on our utility providers going with renewable energy. So that's always been a partnership between our sustainability initiatives and United Power in the northern part of Broomfield and Excel in the south. We also, the mayor and Councilmember Hinkle, and we attended the ribbon cutting at the Northwest Apartments recently. The ribbon cutting was for a large affordable housing complex. And what I thought was most interesting about that I wanted to pass along was that the developer and the architect with whom I spoke personally made a point to say that it was so pleasant to work with our planning staff through the process. So I wanted to pass that along. And the feel-good story also at that event was that a resident of Via Vara who had supported that income-aligned development actually had a grandson who was now living in that income-aligned development and was benefiting from that. And he is in an apprentice plumber program and was able to take advantage of living close to his workplace and that income-aligned housing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other council member updates? Councilmember Delgadillo did join us as well. And it was really one of the highlights of last week. It is spring, so there's tons of events. I had the honor of speaking at our Career Online graduation ceremony on Wednesday. And it was very inspiring to hear the stories of folks that decided to go back and finish and get their diploma, you know, regardless of the adversity that they faced. And then similarly, on Thursday, we had the Broomfield Youth Recognition Awards, which are also a bunch of kiddos who had really tough things thrown in their path, but they didn't give up. They kept going forward, and I just couldn't be more proud to see them just blossom. We also had the Colorado Conservatory of Dance Blossom Ball Friday, another just uplifting and inspiring event. And then on Monday, we declared this week as National Victims' Rights Awareness Week with the police department. So I just wanted to put that on everybody's radar. I did get a really nice email from a proud mom who now I'm proud too. Her son, a local Broomfield student, Nicholas Hoffer, he's a graduating senior at Stargate High School, has been named as a semifinalist in the 2024 U.S. Presidential Scholars Program. So I said I would give a shout out. These semifinalists were selected from over 6,000 candidates that are graduating this year. So one of our own made the finals. Some good news to share. Now back to the meeting. The next is general public comment. So if anyone would like to speak on items not on the agenda, I don't see a whole lot of folks. Now was the time. Then moving on. Thank you for your patience. Next under reports, Joe Vostries and Tim here, Frederick from the Broomfield Town Square Alliance are going to provide council with an update on the Broomfield Town Square Development Project. Mr. Vostries, would you please come to the podium? You're already there.
Good evening, I guess, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, Manager Hoffman, everyone. Tim is out. He's not feeling well today. I think, Tim's in that place right now with a bunch of little kids in the house and in daycare where I feel like he's getting sick about once a month. So he was under the weather, and I remember those days clearly myself. So I'm sympathetic to it. But anyway, you'll have to just put up with me this evening. I'm not going to take a ton of your time. We're in that sort of interesting place in our project right now where we are sort of in the chute, like we're just moving through the process. and staying on schedule, it looks like. So if we want to move to the next slide, we can sort of give you just a little bit of a recap. So in the winter of 2023 and into the spring of 2024, these are the things that we've been up to and have really, I think, accomplished a lot of these things, and they're not impacting our overall development schedule at this point. They're just things we needed to get done. This is not so much our project necessarily, but the Safeway building has gotten a new roof, I think, as you probably all know. And there's just a little bit of interior remediation work going on right now. So I think that we can check that box. And then as we move into the summer, it's really us just advancing all of our construction documents and engineering documents, which we're just signed the contract with Civitas on the on some of the planning and civil engineering stuff. I think today, or I think I signed it today. So that is moving apace. Next slide. The things that are left on our agenda yet, which we'll, I suppose, be seeing you for at some point as we move forward in the process, is the bid organization and our operating plan. We were exchanging documents on that earlier this week or late last week. And then they hopefully getting our permit submitted on the civil engineering side. The urban rural area is going to come before you at some point here this fall and winter. We're working on that right now. And then you can see the rest of it as we move into fall, winter this year and into the early part of next year. We get our construction documents in, get them in for permitting, get our bond. You know, this bond thing is obviously a very big deal. We got to issue bonds and get them sold in order to kick off this project, which goes into next year. And then hopefully we start construction next year. So the train is moving. It appears to be moving on schedule right now. So we just got to keep going to each station is what it feels like right now. But it's methodical at this point. We're feeling good about it. We have challenges, no doubt. If anybody here can please tell me what the bond market's going to look like in spring of 2025, it would be extremely helpful, but that's a risk we're still facing here because we don't know what that's going to look like exactly. And could potentially present some challenges for us, depending on what happens. But that is really it. Happy to answer questions, give you any more information I have that I haven't shared, but I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. And hopefully this is just a reminder of where we are in the process.
Thank you, Mr. Vostri. That's very important that, to get these updates, because we do get a lot of questions. Folks don't realize that large, complex projects like this take time, as you can see all of the pieces that need to move. But we do allow public comment on these items. So if anyone would like to comment, please come up to the podium. Okay, going to council next. Any member of council have any questions or comments? I'm waiting for them to press a button. We have a new system now. And Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
All right. Mr. Vostri, thank you for the update. Thanks for being here tonight. You had mentioned moving through the process, and I know that there's a lot of residents that don't feel like this project is moving, or at least it's not moving fast enough. So I'm glad to hear that you are optimistic. And that you are pleased with the current pathway forward. I think that, normally for council, we get to see the very first kind of hints of a development, and then we get to see the end result of a development. And very rarely do we get to see the sausage making in between. And with this project, we've gotten to see a lot of that in between. And so I think sometimes we get antsy. We're waiting for that end result because we've already seen the first part. So thank you for your, continuing to come and provide these updates. One question I have is, as you saw earlier tonight, the expenses for RTD continue to climb and outpace that revenue. Broomfield is not immune to that either. We continue to see escalating capital and programmatic costs due to inflation and labor costs. And I gotta imagine that the Broomfield Town Square Group is experiencing similar increases in expenses as well. Given that the agreement with Broomfield was drafted in 2019, I was curious if we can expect a request for additional contributions from Broomfield as we are seeing that request coming from other developers.
Well, let me answer that question this way actually, let me back up. I think the lengthy part of this project is behind us. I think once we got the site development plan approved, this sort of entered the normal system. And so we're on the normal schedule at this point. But yeah, it took a long time to get to that key date. And there was a lot of sausage making, as you noted. I think the way to look at it from our standpoint on the cost side is that we, in our projections, we build in escalators over time. So those were always part of our internal, budget, is that when you budget, you sort of think, okay, if this is the date that I'm going to start construction, we put in our budget some cost escalators because we assume that they're going to continue going up. So that's baked in. I think it really goes back to what I was saying earlier about the bond issuance. The bond markets have been crazy, and we just don't know what they're going to look like 12 months from now. And so that's really where we're just on pins and needles, and we just don't know what's going to happen a year from now. I think if we're looking at where things are today, we're pretty optimistic, and feeling pretty good, but they could really hurt us because if the bonds become less valuable, then, we could end up with a gap that we don't have right now. So that's the best answer I can give you, is we don't know yet. But if we can get some stability in the market and things don't change dramatically in that market, I don't think construction costs escalations are going to be an issue because as I said, we built in for those. But interest rates could be, if interest rates suddenly escalate, or which of course affects the bonds as well, right? Because we need three things to do the project. We need to sell bonds. We need to raise capital and pay capital partners a return on investment, and we need to borrow money from the bank. So interest rates really affect all three of those. If interest rates go up, investors want bigger returns, banks want, higher interest payments, and bonds become less valuable. So those are what's facing us. But, that's always been the case through this project. I mean, go back 5-6 years, we've always known that those factors could impact our project. So that's the most honest answer I can give you, is that as we get closer to bond issuance date, that we're going to really have answers to those questions.
And thank you for that. And this is not your first project. This is not your big first, really reinventive project, right, that you've done. And so you've seen these challenges or opportunities ahead. So I appreciate you looking forward to that. And, I anticipate that the bond market will be great, will be in your favor, and we'll be able to move forward with
get the
this
winds
very
at our
easily.
back. Yeah,
That's right.
That's right.
Thank you for being here.
Sure.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for coming and presenting to us. Appreciate, as Councilmember or Member Pro Tem Schaaf said, appreciate you coming and keeping us updated on this. And a couple questions for you. You mentioned the affordable housing partner solicitation. How is that looking? Are you still planning on putting affordable housing in the first phase?
Maybe we could, actually, I have a slide on this. Let me see trying to remember what's on it. Maybe we can jump to doesn't have any great information on it. Actually, go to the next slide. Let's see if there's info on that one. I don't think there is. I thought we were going to put some information in there, and we didn't. So where we are on that right now is that, as you know, we can just do the fee in lieu, which we prepared to do, can do it. Nobody wants us to do that. We don't want to do it. One of the things that what we have proposed, and I think is still out there for discussion as a solution, is this building that you see right here. And I think we've still got some details to work out with the city on this as to whether or not whether this can meet the requirement for affordable housing in our agreement. This would be a mixed income building that we proposed. We have met with several partners on this who are enthusiastic about it. But the question remains as to whether we can meet the requirement with this, putting it all here. So it's really three things. Either we pay the deed in lieu, we put everything here, or we try and figure out how to intersperse it into those existing structures, which is the most challenging. So we like this solution. We have partners that are excited to get involved in this solution if it's deemed to be an acceptable way of meeting the requirement. So I'm personally not 100% sure where we are on determining whether or not this is a viable solution to it.
And that was phase 3, right?
Yes.
What's the timeline?
Well, I mean, it's in the SDP. We can move forward with this. There's nothing holding us back on this. If we can reach an agreement that this is a good way to solve for that requirement, we could move forward with our partners on this. The partners that would develop this with us, they're not going to spend any money or do any of the planning and stuff unless they need a memorandum of understanding that says yes, this works, and we can move forward. So I think that we should work this out over the next couple of months and come to a conclusion as to whether or not this works or not.
Okay, thank you. And the question was already asked about the financing, but I have to think about how it went. Sorry. Given the way the bond markets have been and, the interest rates and everything, what's your time, if you're going to come back to us for additional resources, what's your timeline on that?
Yeah, I'm honestly reluctant to say. I mean, you can see what the schedule is, and I think it's a decision that you make when you get there. And the other thing is that this is a process that you also have to manage, right? It's not just that you're fixed in a slot and you can't ever get out. But as the date becomes closer and you sort of really get your arms around what interest rates are going to look like financing, what the capital deal is going to look like, and what the bonds are likely to generate in terms of proceeds, you can then start making decisions about how are we going to, if there is a gap, how are we going to close it? There's value engineering that can be done, for example. There's just other ways to manage it to get where you need to be. But, listen, it's never been our expectation that, we would be coming back for additional resources. So that would be very much what I would consider to be a last ditch effort. And one I will just state, we're not envisioning that today.
Okay. If that did happen, does that delay the shovel and ground timeline?
Hard to say. I mean, it would depend on, the city and our partnership as well. How are we going to close the gap? I don't even envision how that would work right now. I mean, there's no set mechanism in place to fill any additional gaps. So, there clearly be some sort of we'd have to put our heads together and say, okay, what do we want to do here? And again, until you really understand whether, first of all, if you determine, okay, there is a gap, okay, well, what do we want to do to solve it?
Gotcha. All right. And one last question on your timeline of start of construction in spring 2025. Do you envision anything that will delay that?
No, I mean, as long as we can stay on schedule with entitlements and getting permits and just moving through the process. But again, we're in a more predictable process right now than the process always leading up, to getting zoning approved and site development plans approved is the most unpredictable. Really, once you pass that, you're just sort of on almost benchmark time for how long it takes to produce construction documents and then how long permitting takes with the city, those kinds of things. So we're on a predictable schedule right now.
I appreciate that. It's really good to hear. That's the number one. When it's going to happen is the number one question I get from my residents. And obviously, very well the focus groups were back in 16 or 15, 16?
Something like, yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah. So, all right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to go back to a question that Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf asked you about financing. to continue to belabor the point. He had asked, relating to cost increases for goods and services and construction, et cetera, whether that would impact the financing that you all have in place right now. And you said you've built in already those cost increases. Is that what I heard correctly?
Yes, it's pretty much a standard procedure in the development business that you have to assume that cost of construction is going to increase at roughly the rate of inflation. So when you do your cost estimates, you're going to get your cost estimates back from all your various subcontractors, contractors. And then what you do is you say, okay, well, if we're not going to start construction for 2 years, you have to say, okay, we have to assume that these costs are going to increase at the rate of inflation. So you essentially mark up all those numbers to try and predict where you think you're going to be at the time you start construction.
Okay. When did you all do those cost estimates originally?
If you back up, I think we just redid them. If you back up, updated financial underwriting for Market Hall Apartment Active Adults. We really just did this a few months ago.
Okay, and we had agreed on the financing aspect at what time? So the agreement we have in which we're going to give you X amount of dollars, we're going to give you the land, et cetera. When was that, just as a refresher for council and the community, when was that provided?
2019.
Thank you.
What was it?
2019.
2019, thank you. Okay.
I find it interesting that you all are able to, based on the dollars we have agreed to so far, the land, the Safeway, the sales and use tax, property tax submission to you guys, that you have been able to plan in the significant cost increase that we've seen with construction that I think in many regards have outpaced the level of inflation, and you won't have to come back to us asking for more money. I find that hard to believe unless you have some magical crystal ball.
Well, no, part of what goes in there is you're correct that there is land and there is the pledged revenue from the tax increment financing that has to be bonded, right? So that we updated those numbers. The bond underwriting was updated just recently. But when we put our total package together, we are able to put the land has increased in value as well. So one of the things that's helped in terms of putting the entire capital stack together, when you think of everything that goes into developing this project, land is a significant component of it. And the value of that land has increased, which has helped us on this project as we think about where we have to get equity, we have to get debt, we're going to have bond proceeds. The land is part of that deal, and the increase in the value of the land has played an important part in help keeping pace with that. The only thing that has really, like I said, increased in cost is construction because inflation has been so high. But remember, there were always escalators built into those estimates. And yes, we've had to update them, and we updated them again just a couple of months ago.
Well, that might be true that the land has increased, but everyone's land in Broomfield has increased, and that still hasn't somewhat negated the cost increases we have seen with our own CPI projects. So I'm fairly confident you'll be back for more money.
All
So
right.
I'm just gonna leave it at that. So thank you. That's it.
We're going to try not to, right?
Thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Lim.
Yes, I was particularly interested in the advancement of the active adult construction. So we've certainly seen during the time that we've been speaking with you, in our housing needs assessment, an increase in the number of seniors who have found housing less affordable. Are you giving any thought whatsoever? If I had to pick one area, I mean, that would be just me speaking, but if I had to pick one area where you were, you said you're examining interspersing the affordable housing. If I had to pick one area where you would intersperse the income aligned housing, it would be in that active adult construction area. Do you have to decide that shortly, or is that, how far out would that decision be?
I don't think that that the affordable units were going into that project in any event. The interspersed was in the regular apartments. So I don't think that that was ever a consideration and I could be wrong on that, but my best recollection is that we've always anticipated either getting those units into the planned apartment buildings or doing the fee in lieu, or ideally really creating a whole mixed income project in order to fulfill the requirement.
Okay. My other question would be, I was thinking back to a question that one of our Land Use Review Committee members asked about the possibility of that active adult construction being condos. In light of the fact that we may have condo construction defect legislation passing, any consideration to bring that forward?
Unfortunately, no, we're not able to develop condominiums. I'm
Okay, thank you.
contractually prohibited with my relationship with my bank. We just can't do condos.
Okay, thanks.
That may change someday, hopefully, but not right
Okay,
now.
thanks.
You do have for sale townhomes along the,
We won't be developing those. We're gonna sell that parcel of land to a vertical developer. And there are a bunch of them that do those kinds of really high quality townhomes, but we won't be doing that development ourselves, but those will be for sale for sure.
thank you for that clarification. Sorry, Councilmember Nguyen, your turn.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, thank you for the presentation. And I don't have too many questions, but I just want to emphasize that we're very excited for this project. A lot of our residents, we had our town hall last week, were emphasizing that they saw the posters go up around the old Safeway. And I guess one question that they asked was, and this might be a city question, staff question, there seems to be construction or some roadblocks happening behind the Safeway. Is that part of the Town Square project, or is that something separate? The sidewalk, yeah.
Mr. Romine, it's the retaining wall.
Yeah.
We continue to have issues with that darn retaining wall. But it's something that we have to do from a safety perspective. So you'll continue to see us continuing to reinforce that. And I just, and with Mr. Romine down here, I just wanted to, I wanted to clarify on the affordable housing piece, that those affordable units that were, Curtis, can you go back to the slide that Joe was using? That's right across from the library. Although it's in the PUD, but they'll have to come back for the site development plan to cite that. So just for anybody that's following, from a technical perspective, and it makes a difference because it's timing wise. So
Well, I feel like that particular parcel was kind of put in a special a case where we wanted to hold off on that area until the library plan was solidified. Am I remembering that correctly?
you are.
Okay. That's all. Mr. Romine?
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, City Manager Hoffman is correct. So Justin from Public Works and I have been in not a constant conversation, but a pretty regular conversation about the retaining wall. That's why the First Avenue South Side sidewalk is closed. So you'll see some of it buckling. We're trying to figure out, much like we did with the Safeway building, we're trying to figure out with Justin and his team what a simple fix is that can hold for 2 years or so. As pointed out to me by both Katie Allen and Justin, retaining walls like that sometimes cost $500,000-$600,000. That's an expense that I don't think any of us have anticipated we wanted to incur. So we're trying to find a safe 2 to 3 year solution to that retaining wall, because we do have to have it, and that will reopen the sidewalk. So that's why it's closed and has been through the winter. We are working on it, and Justin and I talked just last week to see if we can get something going this summer. going back to Manager Hoffman's comment, yes, the PUD was approved, and that did talk about those various phasing, if you recall. And so what we have indicated in the preliminary conversations where the Broomfield Town Square Alliance team has asked about that potential solution is oftentimes when city council considers an action. So under the IHO, as you recall, this was a little pre-IHO, but we'd follow that same kind of procedure. One, you can pay the cash in lieu. Two, you could provide the units across the development in an even pattern, or city council could consider an alternative satisfaction. So to some degree, what the Broomfield Town Square Alliance team is proposing is an alternative satisfaction. If you recall, we oftentimes do talk about that when it comes forward to city council in an SDP. That's generally where we document that. It's an MOU and some other agreements that are part of it. So I just want you to understand, at this point, our partners at Broomfield Town Square have suggested this as an approach. We have started a conversation to just say this is how it could move forward. And there's a lot more to come, but we also recognize why they were asking and the timing they're asking. So just to kind of fill in those last blanks. So nothing has been done yet. There's no additional agreements yet. There's nothing being contemplated. We're just trying to figure it out and see if what might be something that would be contemplated or potential for the city council, but it would be coming through with that SDP, just as Manager Hoffman already pointed out. So just to complete that circle on that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Romine. Councilmember Nguyen, did you have any other questions?
No, again, I want to emphasize, we appreciate the communication, and obviously a lot of residents that spoke to us were very interested. They're very keen onto this project since this project's been going on for quite some time. And I'm the new guy here, so when you tell me, spring 2025, I'm excited, and I look forward to hearing back and seeing the proposals coming forth. So thank you so much again for being here.
Of course, always a pleasure.
All right, any other council member questions or comments? Councilmember Holston, Marsh Holston.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one final question on the affordable housing piece. If council agreed to allow the affordable housing in that particular site, is it something you would develop yourself? And is it going to be dependent on, a lot of our affordable units that we've seen come before us are dependent on the CHFA and the state and federal grants, which often delays them because they are a lot, they bid on which one's going to be, so.
We'd be developing with a partner who specializes in doing this kind of thing, and not to make a bit of a sales pitch, but I think the likelihood of us actually delivering, being able to deliver the affordable units that everyone wants, we want too, it just feels like we feel confident we can make it happen here by doing it as a designated project. The struggle we're having right now between the $1 million for the fee in lieu of, and delivering the units comes down to that gap that we were talking about before, that delivering those units actually, it creates a gap. And, I don't think we're going to know here for a little while longer, but it is a gap because the value of the property is obviously lower with those rent reduced apartments in there. So hate to see us end up in that place where we just end up paying the deed in lieu, which is significant. I mean, I think it's $1 million that would go into your fund, but I think everyone would prefer to actually see units delivered, and so would we.
So to that, would you be looking for state or federal grants to be building? So the timing of it would be based on your application and being selected for those grants?
I don't know exactly how all this LIHTC stuff works. We are not affordable housing developers in that category. I can tell you that we have, I think we've met with 3 different partners on this, and all 3 are super excited about this project and really see it as being viable. So we'd love to advance those discussions as quickly as we can and either move ahead with it or rule it out one way or the other. But I think there's still a good chance we still have to go through the SDP process, which takes time, but I think that, I think we could get it on track pretty quickly.
I will say for me that I am.
One question. That's okay, Pedro.
I would say that I'm generally in favor of affordable units being spread out over a site, but this idea does intrigue me, so for me, I'm open to it, so that's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, well, I have heard, and can correct me if I'm wrong, that the bond market is improving.
It has just recently, yes.
Okay.
Cross your fingers.
Well, we're gonna
Yeah.
keep that positive momentum
That's
for,
right.
for everybody's sake. Thank you very much for the update, Mr. Vostries.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Manager Hoffman, do you have a report tonight?
I do not.
And Ms. Rogers, do you have a report?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. Council's consideration of the consent items is next. The clerk will read all of the consent items by title, and there'll be one opportunity for public comments and council questions and comments. Will the clerk please read agenda items 6A through 6E by title?
6A, approval of minutes from the April 9th, 2024 regular city council meeting. 6B, resolution number 2024-42, approving an agreement with Fox Tuttle Transportation Group LLC for Broomfield's Safety Action Plan. 6C, resolution number 2024-48, amending the presiding municipal judge's employment agreement. 6D, resolution number 2024-50, approving a contract for air quality monitoring for oil and gas impacted neighborhoods. 6E, request for executive session regarding large matrix development agreements.
Thank you, Ms. Clemens. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in-person. If anyone would like to be heard on these items, please come up to the podium. I don't see any online, so we'll go to questions and comments from council. Any questions, Councilmember Henkel?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one quick question about the air quality monitoring. It was my understanding during the focus session, we had talked about the property tax funding stream and what that looks like. I was pretty adamant, and I still am, to make sure that we're still on focus with our philosophy on making sure that we have a revenue stream for what we're spending. Can staff just let us know what that funding stream looks like for property tax revenue from extraction oil and gas?
Manager Hoffman?
You bet. Thank you for that question, Councilmember Hinkle. So two pieces. One, if council will remember, not last year, but the year before, when AQM was extended, we didn't have the budget. We hadn't budgeted for it. So then we had a scramble. We didn't want that coming into 2023. So we had already budgeted for air quality monitoring. So those funds were already in the budget. Aside from that, so property tax doesn't come in all at once. Property tax comes in two sections, one in February and one in June. What we didn't want to do was struggle with the commitment to extend that contract for that coverage. So the automatic revenue stream, again, we already had the money in the budget. Moving forward, it will be that identification specifically from oil and gas, which is estimated to be anywhere between 400,000 and 470,000. So there'll be a direct correlation between oil and gas money and having that system in place for those impacted residents.
Okay, and did we receive their payment that was in February?
Generally, it's not a, they don't split their payments like a homeowner does. Generally, those payments come in around July by the time it hits our books, because the payments are due in June, so it's not automatic. So twofold, Councilmember Hinkle, there's already the money in there from 2023 that carried over in anticipation for, because again, we don't budget, we don't allocate the funds that we don't have. So in anticipation of council's direction, we try to prepare for whatever direction you all go, so that we're not trying to play catch up. So as we move forward, the funds were already in the account. Moving forward, that will be a direct allocation. So regardless of when we get those funds from July, we're not taking from anywhere else to pay the air quality monitoring because those funds were already in place. As we move forward, it'll be a direct correlation between the increase on property tax from oil and gas, specifically from Civitas, to continue to pay that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to hear as far as making sure that we're allocating it specifically for that property tax revenue. And yeah, I don't know if anyone else has any comments on this, but I would like to see us get creative in the future. Because I know if we didn't move it towards this, where would all that property tax revenue go to? Would it go to our general fund, or what does that look like?
From the oil and gas?
Or just, you know, from extraction in particular with the property tax revenues? Those property tax revenues would go towards where if we didn't use it for air quality monitoring? What could we use it for? What funding stream would it be put into?
Well, essentially, it goes to all of the oil and gas team, the efforts, the inspections, all of those components over the last 5 years that we didn't have any oil and gas team or project or initiative. So those funds that come in from oil and gas offset all of those costs. So I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question. In other words, would we be spending those funds on something else other than our oil and gas project team?
Yeah, it seems like we're now paying in arrears based on the property tax revenue that we're receiving now. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Well, so property tax comes in arrears, right? So it's,
But 5 years is what you're saying.
God bless you. It's not a one-for-one, Councilmember Hinkle. So if you look over the projected, because we didn't have any money from oil and gas when we started the oil and gas project team. So now we have 6 people that are dedicated to oil and gas efforts, and you operate in the red. So those were coming out of general fund dollars. And then when Civitas, when the 3 pads start generating, they go into production mode, you see a spike from the revenues that we get. Those revenues essentially are going to make the last 3 years make us whole for what we've been expending out of the general fund. So essentially, oil and gas is paying for itself. The revenues that we're collecting from oil and gas now go to pay for oil and gas. So you can't look at it as 1 year at a time, because you go from red to black to red to black to black to black to black back to red. So all of the Ms. Brouillard, as she has laid out, it really, the oil and gas focus, monitoring, inspections, they systematically and strategically follow the operational phase. So it's a full court press until we go into production, because we know that's when the likelihood of big emissions, much higher likelihood of something substantial happening on either one of those pads. Once it goes into production, it's a different level of monitoring and maintenance, which is why, from an air quality monitoring perspective, it's amplified now, especially for those impacted residents, to ensure that they feel confident from a daily basis that they can see what those air quality monitoring events, not just from oil and gas, but overall. So we now have that technology in place, but it is the oil and gas paying for oil and gas.
Oil and gas enforcement.
Also, hold on, I'm not done, Mayor. So with this funding stream moving forward, I would like to just see where the past funding has gone out. It sounds like we've used out of the general fund because we had to, correct? And then in the future, it'll be only directed towards oil and gas remediation efforts and air quality monitoring and those things, correct?
I want to make sure that I'm understanding your question. Repeat it to me, please.
So it sounds like in the past, we have been paying out of pocket essentially, out of our general fund for oil and gas initiatives, correct?
Years prior, yes. Recently, no.
Okay. And so, knowing that we have funding streams coming in and now we're allocating it directly towards oil and gas, it seems like our general fund will be needing some funding from the tax revenue moving forward, in addition to what we're spending on here. Is that correct?
No. It isn't. So again, I think that the easiest way to say this is for the first 3 years, it was general fund supported. And then we went into the black because of the revenue from oil and gas. We continue to be into the black, not only because of the property tax increase, but because of the high rate of return, because now we're in the production phase. Production phase lasts 3 to 4 years, which is why strategically and systematically, we have a reduction in the monitoring component from our team internally. So in other words, it doesn't take the same number of, or it shouldn't take the same number of people that it did 3 years ago before we were in production. So that level of operation should be correlative with the amount of effort that we put forth in order to monitor.
Okay. I understand that. Thank you. I would like to just see in the future, what we're looking at as far as property tax revenue as it comes in, and then what we're expending overall. And I know we talk about this at budget time every time anyway. I just, I'm always hesitant to always, possibly double up on air quality monitoring. But I also know too that I appreciated the fact that we pulled back a lot of our scaling on this, and I was very appreciative of that. But in the future, I would like to just see where we could pull other dollars in, and hopefully we're not in the red again when it comes to oil and gas, but I don't know what that looks like as far as our team goes. I don't know if you can address that at all.
So the strategic approach that we have is it's correlative to where the operation is. So we continue to, so we've had a scaling back over the last 24 months from a team perspective. So again, the amount of effort that it takes in order to promote public health and safety looks very different now, and it will look very different next year and subsequent years, which is why on the air quality monitoring, we went from 11 to 5, right? We don't have the double trigger. We have the 1. And then we have the overall air quality community monitoring, specifically for those impacted residents.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments on the consent items? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. So a huge thank you to City and County Manager Hoffman and the rest of the City and County Managers team and the oil and gas team, just for your work on this oil and gas air quality monitoring for impacted neighborhoods. A huge thank you to Council Members Lim and Anderson for your tireless work on the air monitoring program and your sincere advocacy for the impacted residents. I also wanted to say that tonight we are also approving the Judge Amy Bachman's contract, and the work that the judge has done and the courts team along with her is truly phenomenal. Just continuing to advance the work there, the opportunities to work with the community, but also continuing to modernize the court system over there. So it's truly great to see, and looking forward to that work continuing. So thank you all.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, before asking for a motion, I want to remind everyone that item 6E is a request for an executive session, which requires 2/3 approval of council. Is there a motion by council that the recommendations contained in the staff reports for the consent items be approved? Councilmember Ward.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Nguyen?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. That passes 9-0. Seeing it is 7:59, before we get into the action items, I think it'd be great for us to take our 10-minute recess. So we will be back at 8:10. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome back for part two, where we're just getting into our action items. And our first item tonight is an ordinance regarding the drought response plan. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. And where is Brennan? I don't have my glasses on, so yes, please come down to the podium. Brennan Middleton, we continue to be in awe of Mr. Middleton. The level of expertise and experience and dynamic nature that he brings to our teams with regards to water is something that we are not only appreciative of, but certainly adds a dimension that we haven't had certainly over the last decade. So with that introduction, and our wonderful Ken Rutt, Director of Public Services, continues to recuperate from surgery and joins us virtually for any additional questions. But the floor is yours, Mr. Middleton.
Thank you for the generous introduction, Ms. Hoffman, and good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, and staff. For our presentation tonight, we'll be returning to the topic of drought. We spent a few meetings over the last 2 years discussing Broomfield's overall drought preparedness and water resiliency planning. Although our goal tonight is to narrow the scope of that conversation and focus on the proposed ordinance and associated code updates related to our drought water use restrictions. Next slide, please. So I'll start with a current, just a quick update on current drought status. Snowpack in Broomfield source watersheds is slightly above average, roughly 108% in the Colorado River watershed and just above average for the South Platte River Basin. And just this month, Northern Water set a 70% or average quota for the CBT project. So based on a comparison of expected water supplies to demand for the year, staff is recommended to remain in a normal drought status. And as always, we will continue to monitor water supply conditions as they develop throughout the year. Next slide, please. And so just a quick recap, goals, objectives of the updated drought plan. We wanted to consider the effects of climate change and also water systems emergencies in addition to drought. We identified separate monitoring and response measures for the reuse water system. We updated our water supply and demand projections to thoroughly evaluate our vulnerability to drought as well as climate change. And we also qualitatively assess risks associated with the ongoing Colorado River drought and develop monitoring enforcement strategies and a communications plan. Next slide, please. So just another quick summary of the various elements to the new plan, our drought monitoring indices. These are the metrics we use to define the various stages of drought. The drought stages and process for declaring drought haven't changed from the original plan. We still have drought conditions 1, 2, and 3, and these all include some form of mandatory watering restriction and would require city council approval. One key change here, we are proposing the ability to declare different stages of drought for the potable and reuse water systems, and in turn, different water use restrictions for those customers. Although interconnected, these systems are impacted differently by drought. And so it may not always be necessary to impose restrictions on both systems. And then our response actions, this is a little bit about what we'll be getting into tonight. These are the temporary and mandatory water use restrictions defined for each stage of drought in Broomfield Municipal Code. Next slide. So the first thing that we are proposing is a standard or normal year watering schedule of 3 days per week between the hours of 6 p.m. and 10 a.m. This is a permanent and mandatory watering schedule to be followed by Broomfield water customers year-round, regardless of drought conditions. Next slide, please. So there's quite a bit on this slide, but I just wanted to touch on some of the key changes to the different restrictions under each stage of drought. So first we have our drought watch. You'll notice that this isn't actually defined currently in code nor in our ordinance. And I think it was a question that Councilmember Lim had brought up prior to this meeting, but drought watch is basically a voluntary restriction of no more than 2 days of watering per week. So because it's voluntary and not mandatory, it's not something that we've defined under Broomfield Municipal Code. And so no changes there. Really, that would be used to sort of prepare Broomfield residents for a more stringent drought condition. Drought condition 1, no change in the days per week or time restrictions, but we did add an irrigation target of no more than 1 inch per week for our large properties. This target is meant to provide more specific guidance or watering rules for large property customers to follow. For condition 2, we increased the reduction target from 40% to 50% and reduced irrigation days from 2 to 1 day per week. And then drought condition 3, this is our most severe drought condition. We have not implemented any changes to the water use restrictions here. I do want to note that under Broomfield Municipal Code, the city manager has the authority to declare a temporary water emergency in response to any serious shortage of treated water. So in the event that the restrictions listed for drought condition 3 are insufficient to prevent shortage, a water emergency declaration would allow Broomfield to take additional measures. These include prohibiting or restricting the use of water for commercial or industrial purposes, as well as the use of treated water except for drinking and eating purposes. Next slide, please. Staff is also proposing to revise the current penalty amounts for violating mandatory water use restrictions. This is simply doubling what's currently in the municipal code. These penalty amounts have not been updated for upwards of 20 years, and really these represent sort of the main lever that staff has to enforce these mandatory restrictions. And so we're requesting an increase to the ranges within each offense that's currently defined in code. Next slide. And so our final proposal here is an additional drought surcharge, which could be applied to customers' water usage charges to help recover the lost revenue associated with mandatory water use restrictions and further promote water conservation amongst customers during a drought by specifically targeting outdoor water consumption. Adoption of such a surcharge would still require future approval by City Council during the recommendation of a drought condition 1, 2, or 3. And any proposed surcharge would be limited as follows. The percent increase would be no more than 50% for any individual water use rate. There will be no surcharge on the lowest rate tier for residential water use. And for non-residential customers, there will be no surcharge for water use up to average winter consumption. So really, again, those are just measures to try to target the outdoor portion of our customers' demand profile. Next slide. And this is just a table of all the communities that have some form of drought surcharge currently, whether it's in their drought plan and their municipal code. There's a range of sort of approaches here. And we took the one that we thought was most suitable for Broomfield. And final slide. So proposed ordinance 2219 amends chapters 1336 of the municipal code. If approved on first reading, the ordinance will be published in full, and a public hearing and second and final reading will be scheduled for May 14th, 2024. And that concludes my presentation for this evening. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Middleton. We'll now proceed with public comments. If anyone would like to be heard on this item, please come up to the podium. Not seeing any online either, so we'll move on to questions from council. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion, and the time to state positions for or against this item is later. Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Anderson.
All right, thanks. I think I'll go first. All right, so I did send a few questions in ahead of time, and I did copy console just so you kind of have an idea of what I'm asking. But if you could just quickly go through some of these, like, we talked a lot about an educational model, getting people on board with this. watering every other day, soaking. I don't recall like when we made the change to like this mandatory piece. Do we? Why we don't want to just go with the educational period for a while till people are actually doing this and then move into it? Is there, I don't recall that like what we came up with in that discussion.
Yep, thank you for the question, Councilmember Anderson. And we spoke briefly with Ms. Rogers before this meeting, and I think it's actually a good idea. We would look to actually propose a delayed implementation of the ordinance to the 1st of 2025. That would give us some time for additional customer outreach and education, just so everyone is sort of clear of where we're headed in terms of this normal year, 3-day per week requirement. And I spoke a little bit during the study session about the watering guidance that we sent out last year, but I think we would look to provide additional guidance on that this year, so that our residents know not only how many days a week to water, but more specifically based on their irrigation system and what month it is in the year, how long to actually irrigate their grass. So it would just give us some additional time for that education piece, and something we would propose with the final reading.
Okay, and that'd be super helpful. And then also just ensure that people aren't just double watering on their days, because that will, actually, that's another question. Like when you compare it, if you go from everyday watering to every other day watering, are you watering the same amount, or do you need to increase it like a certain percentage in general? That we can find that out later, but just to make sure we're actually truly by doing this, actually getting that savings.
So that's exactly what, we wouldn't want to move from 3 days to 2 days per week and then just have people increase the time so they're watering the same amount. That wouldn't really have the effect that we're looking for. I think, we've been providing sort of normal conditions or normal year watering guidance in terms of how long you should water each day. If we were to move into a more stringent drought condition, say from 3 days per week to 2 days per week, we would do something similar and provide guidance on how long, people should be watering as well.
Okay, thank you. And then regarding the HOAs that have these long cycles, from one HOA, I heard it was about a 12-hour cycle that they run. And their preference, and this goes back to those discussions earlier, we had just talked about, they would prefer to start in the evening, start at 6 p.m. and let it run all the way through the night and end at 6 a.m. But we don't have those specific, is this intended that they would have to start at midnight, at midnight and run until 6 a.m., stop all day, and then start again at 6 p.m. and finish up? Or can we somehow indicate that HOAs can start on their day and continue all the way through the night of the next morning?
And that's pretty standard practice and something we see, in our own parks department. They water throughout the evening. They have such large areas to water that it often takes, 8 to 12 hours to do that. And so basically, I think we can make this more clear in the code, but the intention was to basically the day you're signed is the day that you would end watering. And we're still sticking with that, it's basically a 6 p.m. to 10 a.m. watering time period. So you're allowed to water within that time, even if it goes between days. But just so people are staggered or our customers are staggered, the day that you sort of end your irrigation is kind of set on your address. So that's something that we'll probably need to clarify in the code before final reading.
Okay, and something staff would maybe bring forward and clarify? Okay. Thank you. That's helpful to HOAs. And then, the runoff. I didn't add this question earlier. How broad is the category of excess runoff in 1336.015B? That was under like lawn irrigation. That doesn't include that's only specific to irrigation, doesn't include the car washing, right?
Yeah, I believe that's referring to like the misuse of water. And really what we're targeting there is just excessive irrigation where it's visible that water's running off from the property. And so no, it wouldn't be like car washing. It's more for on the irrigation side if, a particular customer is repeatedly noticed irrigating so much that it's running off of the property into the streets.
All right, thank you. And then same section in C, this is the one that's probably the most concerning to me, is that violations fall under the penalty set forth in Chapter 112, which includes any person who is convicted of a violation of any such provision shall, for each offense, be punished by a fine not to exceed $2,650 or by imprisonment exceeding 364 days or by combo. That's like really excessive, and that might be a question for the attorney, but that feels like a little bit of overkill.
Yeah, so
Like, if we can-
we're just referring to the general penalty there, which as I understand it, is referenced throughout our municipal code, and sort of the fine amount and the reference to imprisonment. That's sort of the maximum penalty that could be imposed. But really, it's at the authority of the city manager or their designee, in this case, the Public Works Director, to determine what that fine amount would be. We have a fairly set schedule that we've implemented for our stormwater industrial pretreatment programs. If Mr. Rudd is online, he could elaborate on that a little bit. Not sure if.
I love it, yeah. Anytime there, it's in the same sentence, it's city manager and imprisonment.
Yeah.
Kind of makes me stop immediately of what I'm doing. Yes, and so we want to honor and acknowledge that Broomfield is highly compliant. 98% of everything that we initiate, we are a highly compliant community. That said, let us evaluate, and I know Director Rutt is on the line as well. I don't know if he has anything to add to that. Brennan, as usual, your answers are concise and thoughtful. And I would be looking at Attorney Rogers. All of this only goes into effect when it is drought. The likelihood that we would be in this circumstance in order to pull the trigger, no one likes us to use that term anymore, so I apologize. I'm going to reword that. For this to be a trigger for us to walk through from a code compliance perspective, let us look at that language to determine on such a low threshold from our perspective on when that would be needed. That language makes anybody hair on the back of their neck stand up.
And that's in 1336.015C, which is the standard new, because that applies always, the every other day watering.
That's exactly right.
So that penalty would
It's not,
apply.
yeah. And so,
always. Or for all, yeah, so that makes it a little bit more concerning. But yeah, if something, definitely in the future, between the two readings, that'd be helpful to have some clarification, maybe some added language about the penalty. Helpful. And then one last question is, so as we move into these drought conditions 1, 2, and 3, do we have any historic data? Is that like how often we hit even drought level 1, especially compared to 3, is like 10 years, 20 years? Like how often do we anticipate to be at the place that council would be enacting a drought condition?
Yeah, that's, I'll say the only time that Broomfield has enacted a drought condition in the past was during the 2002 drought. So to my knowledge, there's only been one instance of this in Broomfield's history. In terms of predicting how often or frequent this might occur in the future is difficult, especially considering, a changing and warming climate. So, I can't say specifically how often we would expect to enact these various drought conditions, but I think it's reasonable to expect that it's going to be more frequently than it has been, and just make sure that we're better prepared for those situations than trying to plan during an emergency or a crisis like that.
So the only piece that really applies is going into that every other day watering. And I guess that's one last question. Do we have any data that shows how receptive the community has been to the every other day watering? Like responses back? That concerns me a little bit, and that it's good to have that offset that year to get to that point. but it'd be helpful to know maybe between now and the next reading.
Yeah, and I think again, it's that public education and outreach piece because you know, in the state of Colorado with the climate that we have, it's really not necessary to water more than 3 days per week. So, you know, if there are people that are unreceptive to that, I think it would just be sort of educating them on why that's the best practice that's been accepted throughout the Front Range. And again, providing specific guidance on not only how many days per week, but specifically how long you should be running your systems, so that people aren't, you know, following the day per week guidance and then overwatering in terms of their, you know, their times that they're running their system.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mayor, could I make a comment on
Mrs.
the general penalties? So if you see how the penalty provision is written in this proposed ordinance, it's that it gives the guide for fines. On the general penalty provision, which has multiple provisions about penalties that we can impose for all sorts of violations, it talks about conviction. The only person that can send somebody to jail is our municipal judge. So this delegates the city manager or her designee the ability to impose penalties that are consistent with the fines located in Chapter 112. So it references the fines, not the jail. There is no scenario where a city manager could convict somebody and send them to jail. And if we are dealing with a resident that has risen to the level of unlawful activity tied to this ordinance, we're involved with code compliance. We've got other issues with the code, and we would be taking that case to municipal court. So just to alleviate some fears, this is talking about those fines. And $26.50 is a hefty fine. It is our steepest fine, but it is what we impose for a lot of violations of the code. If at the max, it's rare that our fines go to the max.
And we can send out specifically this fine schedule that we use for our stormwater industrial pretreatment programs, but usually at least the first and maybe even the second violations are just a notice. And then the fines start at 50 and kind of scale up by $50. So it's actually less severe of a fine than what we are proposing in Chapter 13.
That would be super helpful. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is Councilmember Marshall Holscher.
Thank you, Mayor. My questions were really along that same line, along the line of the code compliance, and it's helpful to know that we can't send people to jail for this. I still am not necessarily comfortable with the way it's written right now, referencing Chapter 112. Ms. Rogers, is there a process by which we could write something that would be more lenient than 112? A schedule, a code? Is there a precedent for having, you know, more warnings and educational pieces and lesser fines than what's in 112?
Yes. Yes, and we have other sections of the code that have different fine structures than referencing Chapter 112. And the process for doing this since we're on first reading would be the amendment process.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Okay. Because yeah, I mean, I think that I'm happy that I support a mandatory watering schedule. I have no problem with that. But I also don't support a heavy hand of government coming down on people who don't water right. I think that it should be definitely educational. I appreciate the fact that we're going to delay it until next year. I think that's important. I did have one question on the, kind of going off what Councilmember Anderson said on the unlawful wastewater. Is it just, like you said the intention is just irrigation, but is that the way it's written, that it's just irrigation? Or if somebody's washing their car or spraying off their driveway, would that constitute, under the way it's written, just the letter of the law, would that constitute wasting water? Ms. Rogers? I know I see that it's under 133615 irrigation practices. So would that mean it's only related to irrigation?
So we currently have misuse of treated water already in Broomfield Code under 1324, and it specifically calls out flagrantly misuse of water. So I think someone washing their car and it running off into the street couldn't be characterized as a flagrant misuse of water.
Okay.
I would agree. I would think that our office would support a case where somebody maybe every day is washing their car for multiple hours or running a small business washing their car. And we've got, especially as Mr. Middleton mentioned, after notice, after second notice, and they do continuing violations, then we're seeing the flagrant violation and overuse.
Right, that makes sense. And then lastly, on the drought fine schedule, we're doubling all the amounts. Are we seeing that if the current amounts don't work? Are we imposing those fines on people and they're not in the past? If we imposed it and it wasn't getting the results we need, is that why we're doubling it, or is it just because it hasn't been updated in a while?
Yeah, to my knowledge, I don't know that the fines were imposed in 2002 when we had our only mandatory drought condition. So I don't know that they've been imposed. Largely, it's just to sort of, really this is our only, or staff's only ability to enforce these restrictions. And so it's sort of just updating something that in our minds has been largely outdated.
So we don't think that the current fine schedule would be sufficient in a future drought?
I think probably not. I mean, also we're just increasing the range, so we still have some leeway within that range, and we would, unless it was again a flagrant misuse of water, probably wouldn't lean toward the upper end of that range, but it just gives us more of a lever in terms of enforcement of these restrictions.
I think Brennan is saying that well. Ken, did you want to add anything to that also, and maybe talk a little bit about the appeal process? If somebody was issued a violation or a fine, kind of what that looks like?
Sure. Ken Rutt, Director of Public Works. Hopefully you guys can hear me.
We hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Council and managers. A couple things to give you a little more information on the administrative fine process. We have developed a standard operating procedure, also known in an enforcement response procedure, which outlines that basically the first 3 times that a person is abusing the water, they would be giving just a written notice to let them know what they are doing and the actions they need to be taking to correct those actions, along with the educational material for proper watering and so forth. The 4th opportunity then would be a fine of $50. The 5th would be $100. The 6th would be $250. So as you can see, by the 6th time, hopefully that person would make some different choices in how they're using this valuable resource. In any of the cases, there is an appeal process. So if someone feels they're unjustly being singled out, there is an appeal process that they can respond within 15 days of the notice of violation. And then the hearing date would be set and the issue would be reviewed before the fine would be finalized. So that's kind of the process of the administrative penalty area. So as you can see, there's 3 opportunities, plus once the fines start, there's also an appeal process. Have we ever issued a fine in the past? No. We've only had one time where we had to go to that, was 2002, and there was no fines issued at that time. And the hard part is when we're discussing drought conditions is that we do so usually when it's not a drought. Like currently, like the reservoirs are full. We've had a wet spring. The last 2 years have been pretty wet. The winters have had quite a bit of snow and our reservoirs are full. So sometimes it's hard to visualize what would that actually look like. And I don't know how many were living in Broomfield in 2002 or in Colorado, but the reservoirs were were down significantly, and our water usage allocation was dropped to like 40% or 30%, somewhere in that area. So that's a significant reduction in the amount of water we have, and that's what some of these pieces of the ordinance is hoping to address, is that when we are in those dire situation and we are wasting water, that is, we do need to take some form of urgency in getting the behavior adjusted. And so that's kind of the basis behind some of the thought process in developing the code the way we do. And we can include the summary of that administrative enforcement action with the second reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rutt. One final question for Ms. Rogers. The fines that he's mentioning and the administrative fines by the city manager or designee under 133615, are those criminal? So they wouldn't be on somebody's criminal record?
No, they are not criminal.
Great. All right, that's all, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next is Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So to pick off kind of where Councilmember Marshall left off. So with the penalties that are outlined in 1336-060, could those be used for those penalties instead of using the chapter 1-12?
I believe so, yeah. I don't see why we couldn't reference that new section of code that we're proposing instead of 112.
Okay.
Again, so chapter 1324, which is already in code, this relates to the misuse of treated water. This is just one example of somewhere in code where we're already referencing chapter 112. I think you'd find many examples of this, but if council would be more comfortable with the structure that we've outlined in chapter 13, then we could potentially reference that.
Okay, thanks. So in your presentation, this is more under the drought watch status. So this is the irrigation practices during times with no declared drought condition. In your presentation, you mentioned voluntary was written, specifically slide 6 under drought watch. I'm not seeing that same voluntary language written in the proposed ordinance. So it talked about, and I can pull it up real quick. It talked about drought watch, voluntary water use reductions, request that customers voluntarily limit outdoor irrigation to 2 days. That doesn't seem to be voluntary in the ordinance. Am I missing something?
So we don't actually reference drought watch in the ordinance. That's basically a request to our community to voluntarily move from the mandatory 3-day to a 2-day watering schedule. Once we would hit a drought condition 1, that 2-day watering schedule would be mandatory. So it's sort of a preemptive effort to get the community prepared for what might become very quickly a drought condition 1, 2, or 3.
Okay, but there isn't a voluntary, I mean, if this ordinance were to pass, there isn't that voluntary program anymore unless we phase this in. It is a restricted watering days.
It still would be, but we've implemented drought watches. I think as early as 2 years ago, we had a drought watch, but it's not referenced in code because again, it's voluntary, and we're really only spelling out the things that are mandatory and enforceable. So just due to the voluntary nature of that condition, we haven't spelled it out in code. Similar to how it's not referenced in code today.
Okay, I guess I'm missing something because in 1336-015, irrigation practices during times with no declared drought condition. During times that are not declared a drought condition is set forth in this chapter, the customer, owner, and occupant adhere to the following. For turf areas irrigated by potable or reclaimed water, irrigation is limited to 3 days per week.
Right. So that's the mandatory normal year 3-day per week watering schedule that we're proposing. Drought watch would be a voluntary request to move from 3 days to 2 days per week.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying that. So under that same chapter of 1336-015, it doesn't talk about, it talks just about the turf areas. It doesn't talk about trees, shrubs, gardens, pools, vehicle washing, or impervious areas and building maintenance, as shown in such chapters as like 1336-030. I3M. Would it be possible to include that language there in that kind of watering under normal non-drought restrictions, just so that we can clarify that those are acceptable uses in that stage as well?
Yeah, and I think we might have gotten that question from Councilmember Lim, and something that we plan to amend prior to final reading is to make that clarification.
Great, thanks. Drought condition 1. So it talks about that new sod, seed, or reseed shall not be installed between June 1st and September 15th during drought condition 1. But then this section goes on to make exceptions. So I'm confused in drought condition 1. Is there a restriction on installation or not under drought condition 1?
Yes, I believe so. So no new sod seed shall not be installed between the dates referenced, June 1st and September 15th. And then you're referring to section 1 after that, total irrigation is limited to 2 weeks.
Right. So
So I think if it's outside of that window, that date window, then that condition applies.
Okay.
So, so no sod is allowed between, or the installation of sod isn't allowed between June 1st to September 15th.
Okay.
But if we're in a drought condition outside of that window, this condition would apply is kind of, I think, the intent there.
So those exceptions would apply between September 16th and the end of May?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's all the questions I have at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I wasn't following the timeline here. Thank you for your presentation. This is very intricate, and I look forward to talking about the implementation of a better fine, or, less harsh words when we talk about prison term. And I do believe, Attorney Rogers, that the prison term, when we talk about that, that's 364 days and not 365, because I believe the 365 would trigger something along the lines if you are an immigrant and you'd be like deported if that's the case. What's the idea behind 364 days?
Yeah, this was, I'll have to get the exact information, but a couple years ago, we floated an ordinance to change it to 364 because year penalties do have some consequences outside the municipal court case. I can't remember the exact details right now, but generally, I think you're correct, Councilmember Hinkle.
Yeah, I think it has some repercussions with deportation. Thank you. And then are these charges, I'm sorry, my brain hurts today, but I'm thinking these charges are per drought cycle, per year. I'm not seeing like a per something, and I'm missing it. I'm probably missing it.
You're referring to the penalty?
Yeah, so the fees, is that per drought
Per-
cycle?
Per offense, I believe.
Okay. So if you have a warning, then you always have that warning. It won't be restarted the next year, or it won't be restarted during the next drought cycle.
Yeah, I don't think it's really described in that level of detail. I would imagine it would be per drought, right? That offense wouldn't carry over to another drought.
So the perk of Google is that Ken can also message me. So Ken is saying per 12 calendar months.
Okay.
Thanks, Brendan.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't seeing it in there and I wasn't quite sure. Okay. I just want to make sure that if someone does receive a fine, that they understand that and they know that they could start over and have some redemption that next year. And then the third thing is, if they are fined, where will that money go?
That's a good question. Mr. Rutt?
I think Ken is saying the water fund, but I'm going to kick it over to Ken to make sure I'm understanding his comment.
Yeah, to clarify a couple of the questions, the calendar 12 months is January 1st through December 31st, and that's outlined in the administrative policy. And then the funds go back to the water fund, the water enterprise fund.
Okay, thank you very much. And then do they have a certain time period where they have to pay it in? Is that described as well?
It's 30 days.
Okay. Thank you. And then I just have a question, just in my mind, on how this is being implemented. We always have, and we can't get in disputes between renters and homeowners. I do have concerns that that this system could be abused if we have, you know, strife between a homeowner and a renter. And like, let's say the renter is changing the water cycle or whatnot. I know a lot of times, like when I work with renters and help them in rental assistance in my nonprofit area, you know, the homeowners are passing down those fines down to the renters. Have we discussed what watering might look like between this renter and homeowner relationship?
It would remain the same conversation that we have right now, is we're not going to get in between those folks. I mean, that's a private, it's a private contract, it's a private lease. So that would be between the landlord and the renter.
But who would we fine? Would we fine the renter? Would we fine the
Be the
homeowner?
property owner.
Okay, okay. I think, I just might have some more questions about that, and maybe, I don't know what my thoughts are on that. But I know a lot of times that those charges are actually passed down to the renters sometimes, so I just have concerns about that. And then, do we have a history of fines being implemented? It sounds like we don't really have a history of it, so we can't really look back on any of that. Okay. Okay, those are my questions for now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other first round questions? Because I have a second round in the queue. Just want to check. Any people who haven't spoken first? All good? We'll go to you, Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. And I forgot the last 3 questions I had sent in. So these should hopefully go quick. On the 1336, 030E and 040E, Parks and Athletic Fields, there's a question, obviously from Red Leaf, it would refer to their outlot B. And also it'd be like other HOAs have common grounds. Would those go under Parks and Athletic Fields, or just clarification on where those areas designated? Is it in the code somewhere already?
Right, so in the ordinance, we specifically call out single family and duplex dwellings, parks, athletic fields, and golf courses, but then everything else is sort of categorized as a small property or a large property. Based on that, I think it's 1,000 square foot threshold. So it's just
large property.
it'd most likely be a large property, yeah.
Okay, and then I will see if there's any other questions from the HOAs on that one. Under 1336-050, drought condition 3, why are we allowing washing of vehicles when there's a complete prohibition on grass watering? That just seems a little odd, that I think people, if you can't water your grass, why can you wash your car? I don't know what my colleagues think of that one, but that might be worth a.
And I think that's something we'd be open to including as an amendment.
Okay, I'll see if there's support for that and bring it back if there is. And then on the last question on 070C3, the water surcharge and that max 50%, would there be like some kind of sort of calculation done to justify that that's the amount we need? It's not just arbitrary. There'd be some type of a calculation that would say this is the percent we need to charge?
Yeah, so it would, the intent there is to essentially recover costs, you know, for the utility as it always is. And I think you also asked about, you know, the distinguishing between the flat or base charge and the usage charge, and that flat charge is intended to recover our fixed costs. And so that should be fairly constant year to year. It's really the usage charge that would be adjusted.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is Councilmember Marshallson.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Rutt mentioned the administrative policy in relation to the calendar year and also the fine schedule that he was mentioning. Is that something that's published somewhere that the residents can easily access and view, or is that something that's not?
Go ahead, Director Rutt.
Yes, Councilman, Member Marshallson. Yeah, we can post that online if that's, it's a public document, so I don't have any issues with, posting it online, a part of our webpage, information.
Okay, so I guess my thought is that either it's something that we should reference in here, that it refers to that, so it's published, or we should just incorporate it into the ordinance to allow greater transparency was kind of my thought. So, thank you. That was it.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Anderson brought up the water service drought surcharge, which made me think of this piece of this ordinance. So I understand the reasoning behind the need for additional revenue when the community is under drought restrictions. However, I struggle with the premise of the water service drought surcharge. I wonder if it's possible to increase that base rate either in anticipation for that drought condition or after the fact of that drought condition, especially since council must approve both the water service drought surcharge as well as the water rate base charges. So is there a need? This is kind of where my question is, and hopefully I can help myself determine how to deal with this. Is there a need for these charges to be more flexible and time sensitive, that they couldn't be assessed in advance or after a drought restriction was in place?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really comes down to it's difficult to anticipate a drought always before it happens. Oftentimes they develop quickly. They can last briefly or for an extended period of time. And that doesn't always sync up with the sort of the more regular schedule with which we update our rate structures. So, I just think it's in the benefit of Broomfield to have a separate process outside of the normal financial process of, projecting revenues and updating water rates.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, anyone else? Excellent. So next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2219. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2219, amending certain sections of chapter 13-36 of the Broomfield Municipal Code, water use and drought restrictions.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Marshallson.
Mayor, I'm actually going to move that we continue this to a date certain. Given that the likelihood that we're going to have a bunch of amendments on second reading and that residents will need to want to weigh in on the content of those amendments, I feel like we should either continue the first reading to a different date or maybe alternatively schedule a third reading on this. I don't know how that would be worded, but.
This is like the 5th time we've had this discussion. I don't know if you've been keeping track. I have. So I'm kind of curious as to how these public notices haven't really engaged folks. So my only deduction is that they don't care. And so delaying this even more, because this is, how many times, Manager Hoffman?
I apologize. This is number 4. The next one will be number 5.
Okay.
Okay, I withdraw my motion.
Thank you. Would you like to make the regular motion? Councilmember Ward.
I move that ordinance number 2219 be adopted on first reading and ordered published in full, and that a public hearing and second reading of the ordinance be held on May 14th, 2024 at 6 p.m.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Lim. Second. Thank you. Is there any discussion? No? All right. Council, we'll move forward to the vote. Please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote, and the results will be displayed on the screen. That passes 9-0. Thank you all for your robust investigation of this new policy. And thank you, Mr. Middleton,
Thank you
so much. And Mr. Rutt. Stay well. We'll see you soon.
Thank you,
All right, for
appreciate
our
it.
final item under action items, staff will provide council with a legislative update. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Brouillard is making her way down. No one's safe when the legislature is in session. Ms. Brouillard.
Thank you, Manager Hoffman. Mayor Pro Tem and council members, Danae Brilliard. I will say if I look distracted, my phone is here because we are waiting to testify on 1313, which is still not up. It got moved behind accessory dwelling units. And so we are waiting for our opportunity to know that we are up. I think we're on the third panel. So if you want a second meeting after this meeting, it sounds like it will be happening at midnight tonight. So more to come there. So I mentioned on the call yesterday with council that this would be a very in the moment update because a lot of things were happening today. Unfortunately, a lot of the things that we anticipated having happened before this meeting did not. So it will be a pretty brief update, but we did want to just bring you up to speed on what we do know as of right now. So if you can go to the next slide, please. As you all know, the last day of the session is May 8th. So at midnight tonight, that's 14 days if anybody else is counting as well. So we are quickly getting there. A couple things to mention, as I just said, 1313, the Housing and Transit Oriented Communities is scheduled for right now. Council is in an amend position on that bill. It's before the Senate Local Government and Transportation Committee. What I will say is Senator Winter, who is a sponsor of the bill, is also on that committee. We've been working today to look at amendments, and I believe you all saw from CCAT there were 4 amendments introduced last night. Unfortunately, the core concerns that we shared with council, I don't know, back in, I think it was in February around the bill, which kind of talked about local control, land use decisions, the use of the HUTF funds, and the injunction, unfortunately, all still stand in the bill as of right now. The 4 amendments that we did receive last night did not address any of those concerns. I did get to speak with Planning Director Burton Zeddy because they were very technical amendments, and she did say there were some pieces around planning that were helpful, but unfortunately, we didn't make any progress on the big 4 areas. So I don't anticipate an amendment coming tonight to address those. We did work with CML to run those in the House. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful, I think, on 3 attempts. So that's where that bill is right now. We'll have a better update this evening following the committee hearing, and we'll continue to keep you updated. But that's what we know as of right now on 1313. And the bills just keep coming. So I'm not going to talk about all of the bills that have been dropped in the last couple of days, but we did want to flag 2 just for the radar. The first one is House Bill 1460, which is the law enforcement misconduct bill. It is also in House Judiciary right now. I was just talking to Christina Pena Corchada. They were voting on several substantive amendments. But what we wanted to share with council, and I'll look at Attorney Rogers if she has anything to add, but it's a very concerning bill out of the gate. And I'm going to read from my notes so I don't misspeak, as it's still a fairly new bill. But essentially what this bill does is it requires that law enforcement agencies investigate allegations of misconduct, and it provides more information regarding whistleblowers. And I will say from that description, it sounds like a helpful bill, but there's a lot of details in this bill that we are trying to get through. What I would note is that the Chief of Police Association and the Sheriff Association were not contacted prior to this. We were all surprised when it came out as well. I did hear in the Judiciary Committee hearing just now that the bill sponsors came out saying we want to engage with these stakeholders that we didn't engage with prior. So we'll see where that goes. Again, it's preliminary review, a lot of technical amendments, but very concerning. So we'll see where it lands tonight, and we'll work with Attorney Rogers and Chief Hempelman and update accordingly. But we did want to flag that for council's reference. Attorney Rogers, would you add anything?
I appreciate that you said the description is laudable, right? And it sounds like a great thing, but when you look at the detail of this bill, there are some really concerning things that not only are duplicative of existing laws and protections for whistleblowers, but also are a little contradictory with some of our Title VII, our discrimination laws, our other whistleblower laws. The other concern is that this idea of investigations into allegations of unprofessional conduct, it's really vague. And you could be facing a misdemeanor as an officer for not reporting an allegation of unprofessional conduct. So if you said to me, that guy was rude to me, that's unprofessional conduct. So a lot of concerning things about this bill, although potentially a laudable idea.
So more to come on that one as well. Again, they are currently reviewing that in the Judiciary Committee. And the other one we wanted to flag too was Senate Bill 210, modification to laws regarding elections. And City and County Clerk Clemens, if you have anything to add, please do. But we have looked at this bill in a very preliminary way. Joel in the Attorney's Office said it's a very dense bill, and that's a very good description of it. So in a very high level review, we don't see any huge red flags. I think the thing we wanted to flag for this council is they do delay the ranked choice voting rulemaking with the Secretary of State to 2026. So if ranked choice voting was triggered in 2025 in our municipal election, the rulemaking and those extra dollars that would come from that state support would not be there if this bill passes as currently written. So those are the two bills that were introduced in the last, I think, 24 hours. That second bill is sponsored by President Fenberg, and my understanding does have some legs, so we'll continue to monitor it. It is already scheduled for this Thursday in the Senate State Veteran and Military Affairs. And then the last one I'm sure that's on everybody's radar, as we've been talking about it a lot, is the draft property tax bill just came. I believe CCAT maybe and CCI shared it. We'll be sure to put it in the Friday update as well. I printed it and it is a hefty bill, 87 pages, I think. So we have not had time to read it. I think the things that we would share with you from staff's perspective is, as you probably saw in the articles, and as we know, is there's not consensus about what the long-term solution is. One of the big pieces that they're talking about is the backfill, and the concern is that there's not money for backfill. And Councilmember Cohen, I think I heard you ask a question earlier, a comment about education, and those are the two places they always go. So they're looking at general reserves and education. So a lot to be determined with this bill. We need some time to look at it, but it was shared in draft form earlier today. Next slide. And then tonight we had planned on discussing House Bill 1447, transit reform, but unfortunately we don't have a lot of updates on that bill. It is now scheduled, this just happened earlier this evening, for Tuesday, April 30th in House Transportation, Housing and Local Government. Just as a reminder, there are four kind of key issues, and I don't know if Chair Erickson is still here, so wonderful. It kind of ties to his presentation earlier, but we are hearing rumors that a large portion of the bill will stay. So the TOC references the RTD 10-year strategic plan, collaboration and partnership with DRCOG, and the workforce development, but we have been told that the specifics around the RTD board reform will be removed. Unfortunately, we also haven't seen any amendment language here, and as we all know, it could not come to fruition. But now that it is scheduled, we'll continue to work with Representative Lindstedt to see that if we can get that language, and we'll update you all accordingly. But unfortunately, we don't have a huge update tonight because we don't have any new information from our last update. So with that, that concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brouillard. And so I serve on the State Property Tax Commission, and I just got the bill this afternoon as well. So I haven't had a chance to dive in. It's 83 pages. But we're going to be making decisions on that. I don't know if it'll matter to the senator, because it was throughout that process that a lot of people presented to us talking about backfill, and he was sitting there, Senator Hansen, there's no backfill, there's no backfill. So obviously the people that are putting this forward know better that the state doesn't have a magic wand to fill in any type of property tax cuts. So with that, we'll go to our panel of experts. Anybody? Oh, Councilmember Marshallson.
Or just one quick question, and I know you said you haven't dived into the property tax bill, but just a quick on the top, on the the limit on increases year over year. Am I reading it right that it excludes home rule jurisdictions and school boards, but specifically, obviously, home rules? Does that mean it excludes us under the current language?
I'm going to look at Manager Hoffman. I honestly cannot answer that question yet from
I
my
don't think it,
review.
no, we don't know.
TBD, but we will know shortly.
Okay. Thank you. That's it, Mayor.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Councilmember Lim.
Is staff going to try to do calculations as to the impact of this bill? I mean, as it's fluid, I mean, it could be amended. And so I'm just trying to imagine, is staff going to try to do calculations as introduced, and that we would have some information on which to form a council position?
Thank you, Councilmember Lim. Yes. Yes.
Yes, okay. I realize it's challenging, but I just wanted to know your intention, so.
Yes, so from, even before the bill, given that our mayor sits on that, it's, we have the structure built. It's like anything else. Anytime that we can have a repeatable process where we can just drop the information in. So that's what we're attempting to do. I can tell you that Ms. Brouillard, that 1313 for staff has been so time consuming, probably 200 plus hours from staff time. So live and learn, we will adjust next year. So this immediate kind of turnaround time and digesting, it's not just adding another body from a legislative perspective, because it takes very specialized, specific knowledge in order to pull all of these pieces together. So yes, we'll do our best. Yes, we have some preliminary numbers. I don't want to share those because we haven't vetted them yet. And taking a 1-year snapshot is not going to do us, it's not going to serve us well. So we have to have time to contemplate what that long-term impact looks like. And then there's about 4 different scenarios for each one of those opportunities, is what they're calling them. So again, we'll turn it around as quickly as we can, but we want it to be as accurate as we can make it. And now that 1313, those amendments truly have fallen on deaf ears, we're able to recalibrate what that energy looks like. So I would say we should be able to have something to council, if not by Friday, certainly on Monday.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. We are all in organizations where we're going to be asked to vote, I think. So,
sure.
I mean, council will not be taking a formal position then, because we won't, I'm thinking of meetings. Will we have a meeting in which we would ever take a formal position on the property tax bill?
We talked about that just today before we headed down for the council meeting, given that this is really the last update. And it's not uncommon during that 14-day crux period. So what staff's recommendation would be is to do it via email. Again, it's messy to a certain degree because it doesn't allow for kind of that back and forth on the Q&A. And it also doesn't allow for the community to be tracking the support or not support. So whether it's a special meeting or Zoom or something along those lines. And it also depends, Councilmember Lim, on the likelihood that it's going to resonate with the sponsors. That's not to say that we wouldn't weigh in because we don't think we're going to make a difference, but weighing in virtually on this tax information is going to be almost impossible. because it is so, it's so complex. So for any community, and I have to say that a lot of these communities are looking to us. A lot of these lobbying organizations look to us specifically for our ability to turn it around quick. And I don't know if we're going to be able to do it on this one because it's just so damn complex.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I think we could probably get some help from our lobbying agencies that have larger staff that are just devoted to this. I'm sure CCAT and CCI and CML, or they have lobby teams are digging in. So I'm going to rely on them. Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation tonight, and I did listen to the legislative update today. Just two things. One about the property tax bill. I appreciate any sort of information that we can get tomorrow. I'll be diving into it as well, even though I have a full-time job tomorrow. I will need to meet on Thursday with CCI and same with Councilmember Marshall Holshin on, we still haven't gotten together on if he can be there during that time during the Finance Steering Committee. But I think, you know, we're gonna have to abstain from voting and then, you know, just provide feedback. But if there's any points that we can make on Thursday, I know that you update us on anything that's CCI related. But I don't know if you want to address that now with CCI or not.
Councilmember Hinkle, thank you. Just for the reference of the body, I did review the agenda for Thursday, and we're in the process of updating that CCI tracking sheet. From memory, they have the bills that I just discussed. So the misconduct bill is on there for Thursday. The 14, the transit reform bill is on there. The elections bill is on there. There is one bill on there that I did not cover, and that is, let me just pull it up really quickly. It is related to property tax. It's a ballot question. It has been introduced. It has not been scheduled, and it only has one sponsor, so likely not worth investing a lot of time in right now. And then the last bill on CCI's agenda does not pertain to Broomfield. So luckily, a pretty light agenda. We'll get that to you all for reference. But outside of the three bills that I just talked about, I think the rest don't impact Broomfield for Thursday's meeting.
So Councilmember Hinkle, if I may, so, and we're well versed with the CCI email, because while we were discussing this, is when they sent the special meeting for Thursday. So, logically, how any one of those communities is going to be able to have any opinion on it, I would be really hesitant to, not only not are they going to be able to weigh in on it, or if they decide to weigh in on it, it's going to be, here's what we think is going to happen, or because there's no way that technically any staff, I don't care who you are, how well versed you are, and we fundamentally have the best matrix team on these, especially on the complex nature of it. I'm not going to say anything else about how CCI could weigh in on it. I don't know if we're going to be able to have anything for you and Councilmember Marshall Holshin by Thursday.
Okay, just so you know, they did send out an email though that they did have it on the for, let's see, I'm sorry, for the Tax and Finance Steering Committee for Thursday. So there will be a
Oh, yeah.
discussion. But you know, I don't know which counties are already ahead. I know that we do have some representatives at CCI who have been on that task force. So maybe they could speak to it like tomorrow. But you know, if there is anything tomorrow,
Sure.
we all realize this, that we have a fast turnaround time. But if it's going to be discussed, I just don't want to be caught flat-footed.
Manager Hoffman, may I add, because I think there's
Sure.
confusion. So the taxation and finance bill that will be discussed is HCR 241006, which is the property tax revenue growth limit force. And that, just to clarify, and if I'm misunderstanding, I'm sorry, but that is different than the draft property tax bill that we just discussed. So that will be, that's a different bill. It's a resolution by a sponsor to kind of circumvent this bill with a different proposal. And we
Okay.
do have notes in there for you for that. We just won't have it
Already.
on this more robust property tax bill.
Okay, I've been just hearing through people like Tamara about, what are our thoughts on this bill? And they're wanting some quick feedback, but, if, whether or not we talk about it on Thursday, sometimes they add things to our agenda. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but they'll add things to our agenda at the last minute. And it's very concerning to me, so that I'll provide feedback back to CCI about what they do, because I've seen things not put on our agenda and all of a sudden we're talking about it. So, I would like to provide that. I have a feeling somebody will add it to the agenda at the last minute. In addition to that, just in the future, I would love to just hear back on our, modifications to, our ordinances that we punted back to the state regarding our firearms ordinances, and just later on, not now, just to circle back on if the state did anything with those firearm ordinances, or, I know we don't have any updates on the one that we provided for the amendments for the concealed carry. But I would like to just know what has been done about those ordinances, and if we need to act locally if the state did not act.
Councilmember Hinkle, so just a quick update. The House Bill 1174, which was the concealed carry permits and training that council moved to the amend position on, it is passed and been signed by the governor, so that will go into effect. So we're working on that with Chief Hempelman and that staff. So that one did move through. HB 1372, which was the regulating law enforcement use of prone restraint, which council's in an amend position. It is almost through the first chamber, and just before I came down here, it was scheduled for Senate Judiciary for the 29th. So with a week left in the calendar. So that's where both of those bills are currently. One done and one still moving.
And Councilmember Hinkle, another one that council had deferred to the state was the assault weapon and the rapid fire trigger activator. That ban is still going through. It was, let's see, it was introduced in the Senate on 4/18, and we expect, well, that one's getting a lot of challenges and pushback, so we'll see what happens, but that one's still moving forward.
Okay, interesting. It seemed like yesterday there was no news, and I feel like there's news now, but thank you.
And our, and just for council's knowledge, Chief Hempelman testified during the first committee hearing, vehemently opposed to the prone bill, and plans on going on the 29th as well.
I would like to join, and I will testify on my own behalf in opposition. I told her I would.
I would, thank you.
And Ms. Broyard, the prone bill's been amended, so we'll make sure to circulate the newly amended one that mandates a training regimen, very similar to what Broomfield already does.
Yeah, and those are the old amendments, I think, from our last update that were made in the House in that first committee hearing that Manager Hoffman was referring to. Thank you, Attorney Rogers.
Thank you. Is that all, Councilmember Hinkle? Okay, Councilmember Ward?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one bill that I have a question on, which is HB 24-1447. I know it's been said it will be amended to got about half the bill's intended target. But my question goes to page 37, line 18. It's adding section 43-1, 1104.5, the coordination between metropolitan planning organizations and transit providers. So currently, the Colorado Revised Statutes in Title 30 prohibits counties, including cities and counties, from operating their own public transit authority without first getting essentially the blessing of RTD, working in cooperation and pursuant with the Board of Directors. This new language says any regional authority or county or municipality that provides transit services shall collaborate with local governments, i.e. send their plans to the Metropolitan Planning Organization. Do we think that supersedes the Title 30 requirement, or is this just some sort of general thing that they put in?
Let me look into that on Councilmember Ward.
Okay.
My gut reaction is no.
That's
This
fine.
doesn't supersede. This is like, and please have a party and collaborate over here, but you're still prohibited. But I'll compare the language in both.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to make that clarification. That's all. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Councilmember Marshallson?
Just one final comment on for staff, especially on the property tax bill. I do have CML Executive Committee this Friday morning. It's not this new property tax bill is not currently on the agenda, but I imagine I'll see a supplemental agenda item coming in tomorrow. So likely we'll be discussing it at CML, so.
Right now, since it hasn't been formally introduced and we all just, it's hot off the press, there's a lot of speculation and a lot of, what ifs, plus we may be asked if, at the Property Tax Commission, if we would possibly support a special session to, get a bipartisan bill with stakeholdering and all that stuff on the ballot. Might have to do a companion initiative to combat I-50.
Wow, that sucks.
I know.
That's not a bad idea because it's just so
People aren't excited
complicated.
that have read a little bit of the Hanson bill. It's got some problems and to be fleshed out. So.
To be fleshed out.
And some of it was never discussed in the Property Tax Commission, so it wasn't our product. So that's the other. So they're coming back to us with, what do you think? So I'm going to be diving in tomorrow. I have a 9 a.m. legislative committee with Metro Mayor's Caucus in the morning. So I'll be reading. You got another question, Councilmember Hinkle?
Okay. I would, just in the future, it would be nice to know how these would play out with any future ballot initiatives. I worry about ballot initiatives coming forward that negates all of this work.
Well, there is one that is coming forward that negates all the work. No, seriously. So it's already on there. And so again, they're chasing. They're chasing,
they're negotiating hard and soft caps that they think might counteract,
That's exactly right, Mayor.
4%, 5% and 50, whatever it is. Did who? I didn't hear that. No.
There's not a logical reason why they would pull it because they've already, it's already on, it's been approved.
You're talking about Michael Fields pulling it? No, that ship sailed. Oh yeah, phone a friend.
We on Initiative 50, but they have identified certain problems with it and are going to gather signatures on one of the other initiatives they have prepped. Like there might be a reason to pull, the sponsors might pull 50.
Have you seen the document in the Property Tax Commission folder that shows the list of all of the potential? So they've got a backup to a backup to a backup.
Yeah.
Fields has several. So look in those LCS Property Tax Commission emails I've been forwarding. You can get into all of the different proposed initiatives, and it's mind-boggling what they're trying to do. So the dust hasn't settled on them, obviously, but we're watching. We just got to stay vigilant. And it looks like this temporary Property Tax Commission that was supposed to end on March 15th might continue in perpetuity because he keeps adding more meetings. This is like 2 extra already now. So I'm there for it. And I'll keep y'all posted. And Danae, thank you. Is there anybody else that had any other questions? All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for being down there. I can't believe they still haven't gotten to third. Well, I guess I can. I'm not surprised by any of this. All right. So we don't have to vote on that. If a council member, we did that. Let me find my place. Well, that completes our discussion and votes on pending legislation. There are no requests for future action this evening. And is there any other business to come before the council? Being no further business, the council meeting is adjourned. Good night.